Chapter 108, 1 year later. Brother Feng, I was only teasing you. Hongwu Wengweng's voice drifted over. Shi Feng offered a quiet smile. All right, let's head back up. An hour later, Shi Feng entered the third-year elite class dormitories. 3 adjacent buildings housed over 20 students. The moment he appeared, every head turned his way. In a single motion, they dropped to one knee and bowed, voices echoing together. Master Feng! Shi Feng surveyed them coolly. Over the past year, he'd grown into a force to be reckoned with. A mere 10.5 years old, yet already a 36th-level cultivator. One after another, the strongest students had challenged him, hoping to test their mettle. None had succeeded. 4 or 5 particularly bold contenders now stood with ashen faces, still trembling from the venom he'd used in training. And if Shi Feng hadn't purged it afterward, they'd have succumbed long ago. Standing a few paces away, Hu Liena met his gaze. Nearly 16 now, she'd joined the Soul Sect a year earlier. Though her progress had slowed since pledging her soul, she'd nonetheless reached the 44th level, a testament to her talent and determination. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the compound, 2 figures appeared at the foot of Mount Pope. Their silhouettes grew sharper in the fading light, and a new chapter in their journey was about to unfold. Hu Liena was a striking figure, about 5'7", with a finely featured face framed by ear-length purple hair that danced in the breeze. Her large fox-like eyes were so vividly colored they seemed almost alive, as if they could charm anyone who met her gaze. Walking beside her was Shi Feng, a handsome young man roughly 5'10" tall. His posture was straight and confident, and a gentle smile never left his lips. "Come on, Feng," Hu Liena called, tugging at his sleeve as they reached the foot of a broad stone staircase. "Let's hurry up. Professor might already be waiting for us." Shi Feng sighed inwardly. For over a year now, Hu Liena had insisted he address her as senior sister, and he still wasn't comfortable with it. He glanced at her and murmured, "All right, senior sister." Her eyes lit up with mischief. "Or if you prefer, you can still call me Nana, Naer, little Nana, whatever feels right to you." Shi Feng rolled his eyes, though a faint smile tugged at his own lips. Over the past 12 months, she'd never given up pursuing him, using every playful trick in the book. Together, they climbed the remaining steps, side by side, as the morning sun spilled across the campus, and the promise of a new day lay before them. If it weren't for Shi Feng's extraordinary strength, Hu Liena's suitors would have torn him apart in the academy courtyard by now. As for Zhao Yoyue's little attendant, he'd already forbidden her from showing any undue familiarity, or from calling him master in public. He could compel Zhao Yoyue to follow his orders, but he couldn't control her feelings, and every time she shot him a sorrowful, wronged look, like a daughter-in-law who'd been mistreated, his annoyance with Hu Liena only grew. Now the summer vacation had arrived, and Hu Liena could barely contain her excitement at the thought of 2 months alone with Shi Feng. She'd even devised elaborate schemes to bring him down during the break, determined to prove her superiority once and for all. "Sister Lena, please slow down," Shi Feng called, hastening after her as she strode down the polished marble staircase. The guards on either side bowed their heads respectfully. Absent from the academy for a year, Hu Liena had returned more radiant than ever, her beauty so commanding that even the venerable elders dared not meet her gaze. Previously, only the Pope had inspired such reverence. Now, another presence held that same power over them. Hu Liena tugged Shi Feng's hand as they bounded up the marble staircase, her laughter like silver bells ringing through the hallway. Even her giggle felt charged with excitement. As soon as they reached the Pope's palace, she guided him straight toward Master Bibi Dong's study. "It's still early," she whispered, cheeks flushed. "Let's greet Master before we do anything else." Inside the study, Master Bibi Dong had set aside her papers and awaited their arrival. It was the only holiday the Wuhundian Academy afforded each year, and she had spent the whole time longing for her 2 beloved disciples, whom she hadn't seen in a full year. No sooner had Shi Feng and Hu Liena stepped across the threshold than she rose to her feet, her eyes shining with joy. "Master!" they both called in unison. Bibi Dong hurried forward and regarded Shi Feng with a fond, scrutinizing gaze. He was already a head taller than she, his strong jawline and clear eyes lending him an air of rare nobility. A hero in the making, she thought. Such young men were seldom seen these days. You finally returned. Come, sit with me. Let us, master and disciples, revel in this reunion. Though only a year had passed, Bibi Dong seemed younger than ever. Her flawless skin and lively spirit befitted a woman in her mid-20s, yet her posture and confidence spoke of the seasoned mentor her students revered. The three of them settled around the low table, ready to share stories, laughter, and the bonds of kinship that time had only strengthened. Bibi Dong's presence seemed to blend youthful energy with mature poise, making her all the more captivating. She looked at her two disciples with a relieved smile and said, I've watched your progress over the past year. You've both worked very hard. Shi Feng, you've kept up your cultivation pace, and at just 10 years old, you've already reached level 36. She reached into her robes and produced several small jade bottles filled with pills. These are for you. Huliana picked one up, examining it curiously. What are these? Pills, Shi Feng answered, then explained the purpose and effects of each one. As Huliana listened, her eyes grew wide with amazement. They're incredible. Thank you, teacher, she said gratefully. Bibi Dong waved her hand. No need to thank me. If anyone deserves your gratitude, it's Shi Feng here. It was Master Lu who taught me how to refine these elixirs, Shi Feng explained, producing the vials. That's why I have them. Huliana's eyes widened in surprise. She opened her mouth to question him, but Shi Feng held up a hand. Senior sister, don't pry. This is my secret. She curled a disdainful smile. As if I really care about your little secrets. Bibi Dong cleared her throat. Regardless, you both should take the Peiyuan pill this evening. It will awaken hidden potential and accelerate your cultivation. Shi Feng and Huliana exchanged eager glances and nodded in unison. Bibi Dong's expression darkened slightly. Unfortunately, the Gaosheng pill, our only side-effect-free elixir, depends on herbs so rare that even with the Spirit Hall's agents scouring every corner of the continent, we still haven't found them all. Shi Feng felt a surge of excitement. Master, he said, I've discovered a hidden grove where elixirs grow in abundance, and rarer still, immortal herbs flourish there. If we can harvest those plants, we might finally have the ingredients to refine the High Ascension pill. Bibi Dong's eyes lit up. In the years since she first tasted the pill's power, she'd already distributed doses to the soul masters of the Wuhun Temple, and even the army's elite had begun using them to strengthen their souls. Under its influence, the temple's overall might had multiplied several times over. Shi Feng nodded. The grove lies in the heart of the Sunset Forest, not far from Tiando City. Few have ever ventured inside. It's a secluded valley teeming with elixirs. The climate there accelerates growth so dramatically that a herb cultivated for 10 years in the valley equals one grown for a century elsewhere. If we claim it as our own medicinal field, we'll secure a continuous supply of the rarest ingredients. Bibi Dong placed a warm hand on his shoulder. Shi Feng, she said, her voice soft with gratitude, you truly are the Spirit Temple's lucky star. We'll never forget your contribution. Chapter 109. Departing from Sunset Forest. When our Spirit Hall finally unifies the entire mainland, Bibi Dong said, eyes shining, you will be remembered as our greatest hero for generations to come. She was so thrilled, she nearly threw her arms around Shi Feng and pressed a kiss to his cheek. Normally she might have peppered him with questions. After all, he was an inheritor like herself. But today she let it pass. If he knew something extraordinary, so much the better for them. Shi Feng waved off her enthusiasm. It was Master's doing, but the area is no longer open. A titled Douluo has moved in. Bibi Dong's brow arched. Who is it? That fellow calls himself Poison, but his real name is Douluo. The moment Bibi Dong heard the name, memories flooded in. Douluo, whose martial spirit is the Jade Phosphorus Snake Emperor, was renowned as the world's deadliest poison expert. Among all the titled Douluo, he was second to none in concocting toxic assaults, and he excelled at coordinated large-scale attacks. He had a lone wolf temperament, paid little heed to Spirit Hall affairs, and did exactly as he pleased. Sheesh, Bibi Dong muttered. Douluo of all people. We once tried to recruit him into the Spirit Hall, but he flatly refused. Shi Feng nodded. He disrespected me at the time, so I sent Douluo and Ghost Douluo to hunt him down. But he was too elusive. You know how stubborn he can be. Bibi Dong sighed. That explains why he's claimed the territory for himself. I suppose no one else dares challenge him. Shi Feng folded his arms. Exactly. That's why we need a new approach. We can't just send in 2 Douluo and hope for the best. I have a plan, but I'll need your support and some of your resources. Bibi Dong smiled, already brimming with excitement. Name it. Let's show Douluo why no one can outwit the Spirit Hall. As the crimson sun sank behind the trees of Sunset Forest, the 2 allies leaned in, plotting their next move. The final showdown for that coveted territory and the honor of the Spirit Hall was about to begin. Shi Feng had been gravely wounded in the last battle and only survived because Prince Shui Xing of the Heaven Do Empire swept in at the last moment. Since then, the proud young man had been forced to linger at the prince's side like a pet, an indignity he'd never imagined he'd endure. Teacher, someone called, breaking Shi Feng's reverie as they gathered in the courtyard outside Master Bibi Dong's herb room. Is it all right for us to go collect medicine tomorrow? Of course. Bibi Dong's laughter rang clear in the cool morning air. This time, I'll lead the expedition myself. If he dares to show his face, he won't leave this mountain alive. She glanced at Shi Feng. You two, get back to the dorm and rest up. Tomorrow's free. At dawn the day after, we leave. Be ready. Yes, teacher, the students' chorus, reluctance and excitement mingling in their voices. Left alone, Shi Feng trudged back to the dormitory, every step heavier than the last. As he pushed open the door, he found Hu Liana leaning against the wall, her dark eyes fixed on him like twin lanterns. Senior sister, he began, but she didn't let him finish. Her gaze was unsettlingly intense, curious, even challenging. Why are you staring at me? He asked, trying to sound casual but failing. Hu Liana's lips curved into a sly smile. Shi Feng, you've got secrets. Big ones. If you don't spill them, my family's reputation will take a hit, and they're not the sort to take that lying down. Shi Feng opened his mouth, out of answers. Family reputation? What are you talking about? Without warning, Hu Liana pushed off the wall, stepping forward until Shi Feng was backed against the sofa. Her expression was playful but determined. He swallowed. Whatever she had in mind, it was clear she wasn't going to let him go until she'd gotten to the bottom of his past and the mysterious bond between him and Prince Shi Xing. Tomorrow, they would head into the mountains in search of rare medicinal herbs. But tonight, Shi Feng realized, a different sort of challenge awaited him, one he might not be prepared for. What do you say? Hu Liana asked, one brow raised. Shi Feng couldn't bring himself to look at her. Senior sister, please don't press me. Even Master hasn't coaxed it out of me, so there's nothing more to tell. She gave a mock sigh of defeat. Fine, you win. Tonight I'll let you off the hook, but first I'm going to take that magic pill. Hu Liana flashed a playful smile, her gaze slipping provocatively downward. Before she could reach him, Shi Feng's expression darkened. He reacted in a flash, snapping his hands up to protect himself. Hey, relax, she laughed, withdrawing her fingers. I was only teasing. You're growing up so quickly, little brother. Shi Feng managed a wry smile. He still couldn't fathom exactly what strange hormones he'd absorbed in this life, but his body had gone into overdrive. At just 10 years old, he already towered at 1.8 meters, far above the under 1.7 meters he'd reached in his past life. And in certain other areas, well, impressive, barely covered it. It was both his pride and his burden. With someone as perceptive as Hu Liana, even the slightest movement gave him away. Shi Feng didn't relax until Hu Liana had disappeared from sight. As he sat up, he couldn't help but notice how the trace of youthful green in her eyes had faded, replaced by a steadily intensifying allure. In just a few years, he thought, she would be a force to reckon with. He sighed and withdrew the small vial Bibi Grotto's master had pressed into his hand. Tipping out a single foundation consolidation pill, he explained to himself its limits. It could only strengthen his core and awaken hidden potential once per cultivation tier. Any further doses at the same level would be wasted unless he obtained a higher-grade version. Even so, the pill's craftsmanship spoke volumes. In barely a year, Wuhan Hall's refining techniques had soared to high-grade artistry. Shi Feng placed the pill on his tongue. It dissolved instantly, a gentle heat blossoming at the back of his throat before coursing through his limbs and settling into his bones. Mild yet powerful, the elixir expanded his dantian and unblocked stubborn meridians. 2 hours later, its effects had slowed to a soft hum, leaving him with a profound sense of newfound strength. Shi Feng settled onto the meditation mat and took a slow, steady breath. As he began to circulate his soul force, he immediately felt his meridians widening and the power within him rushing with fresh vigor. His cultivation rate surged, far beyond its usual pace. A smile tugged at his lips. "Not bad," he murmured, pleasantly surprised. Even before, his progress had outstripped that of ordinary practitioners. Now, with his enhanced aptitude, he was sure to pull even further ahead. Just then, the door burst open and Lina came dashing in, excitement written all over her face. She lunged for him so energetically that Shi Feng had time for only a split-second dodge, leaving her momentarily suspended in midair. Undeterred, she laughed breathlessly. "Xiaofeng, this elixir is unbelievable. After just one dose, my cultivation has skyrocketed. I have to send some to my brother right away." Shi Feng rose to his feet, curiosity piqued. If it worked this well on Juliana, its effects on others, especially her martial adept brother, could be even greater. He met her sparkling eyes and nodded. "Let's make sure he gets it." Juliana wriggled out of Shi Feng's arms and swung her legs off the bed. "I'm going back to practice," she declared, already scrambling to her feet. Shi Feng grabbed her wrist. "It's the middle of the night. Aren't you worried about disturbing everyone's cultivation? Besides, as the senior disciple, your brother's already received his share of the pills. You don't need to sneak off." Juliana blinked. "That's true." She shook off his grip and darted down the corridor without another word. Shi Feng watched her go, shaking his head. "Has she mellowed out somehow?" Before dawn on the third day, the expeditionary team slipped out of Wuhan City and set its course for the capital of the Heaven Dou Empire. Shi Feng surveyed the senior figures assembled before him, Douluo, the brooding ghost Douluo, and 2 other elder masters whose battle reputations were second to none. Looming slightly apart from them all stood the formidable Bibi Dong, her presence as chilling as the wind that swept through the courtyard. Trailing behind were 6 lean alchemists, each well into their 50s. Their robes still smelled faintly of powdered herbs and drying roots, an unmistakable sign of years spent steeped in medicinal research. Together, this was the strongest combat alchemical force Shi Feng had ever seen gathered for a single mission. As the first light of morning tinted the sky, they mounted their beasts and forged ahead, every mind set on the trials that awaited them at the imperial capital. Shi Feng immediately recognized the elderly scholars before him as the alchemists of Wuhun Palace. Each bore a flushed complexion, and whenever they glanced at Bibi Dong, their eyes shone with deep respect and gratefulness. After all, a single miraculous pill of her creation was worth more to them than 10 years of their own lives. They traveled without an escort of imperial guards. After all, they were headed into the heart of the heavenly Dou Empire, nearly within sight of Dou City itself, and they preferred to move quietly. Dressed in plain clothes with no Wuhun temple insignia, and with the 4 senior alchemists suppressing their titled Douluo auras, the caravan looked no different from any other merchant group on the road. In just half a day's journey, they crossed into the Barak Kingdom on the empire's southern frontier, then followed the smooth, official roadway northward. By evening, they reached a small town perched on the edge of Soto City, one of Barak's 2 major hubs. There, they secured rooms at a modest but comfortable inn, perfectly adequate for a night's rest before pressing on. Chapter 110. An unexpected encounter. Despite Bibi Dong's noble lineage, she made no protest about staying in this modest inn, so humble compared to the lavish quarters of the Pope's palace, and her face betrayed no emotion. The ground floor served as the common dining hall, while the upper stories were lined with guest rooms. Once their rooms were settled, the party descended to eat. Inside, the scene was utter chaos. Patrons shouted at each other across rickety tables, mugs clattered against wooden beams, and the occasional thud of a fist against flesh rang out in the din. The 4 elders accompanying Bibi Dong knitted their brows in disapproval. One of them stepped forward and spoke in a sonorous voice. "Master, is there not a private room we might use?" His words, rich with authority, sliced through the cacophony. Heads swiveled, and a hush fell over the hall, only to be replaced by a rising chorus of astonished murmurs. By the heavens, such beauty! Is she a goddess sent from the skies? I can scarcely bear to look, there are two of them. Good grief, I'm undone. Back off, lads. These fair maidens are already claimed. With that, the bawdy tavern erupted anew. Laughter cackled, tankards were raised, and every man in the room turned his eager gaze on Bibi Dong and her companion, Hu Liena, their eyes shining with excitement at this unexpected encounter. A few brash onlookers surged forward, eyes leering, hearts racing at the thought of glimpsing the beauties beneath Bibi Dong's and Hu Liena's robes. The instant the crowd pressed in, the four elders' expressions turned stone cold. How dare these insects violate the Pope's dignity? Out! The same elder thundered, and at once the pressure of a Douluo title exploded around him, sweeping through the entire hall. A suffocating force gripped everyone by the throat. Faces drained of color, eyes went wide in terror. Those nearest to Bibi Dong crumpled to the floor. Within heartbeat, the elder withdrew his aura, but his brief display had been enough. Screaming in fright, diners tumbled away, scrambling for the exits. In less than a breath, the once bustling banquet hall lay deserted. Bibi Dong gave Ju Douluo and Ghost Douluo a single nod. They understood immediately and slipped out of the hotel at her side, leaving the empty dining hall behind. Bibi Douluo and the others settled into seats. 3 masters and their apprentices shared one table, 2 elder Douluo took another, and a handful of lesser alchemists clustered at a third. The shop owner's face went white. He called a waiter over with trembling hands. "Honored guests, what would you like to eat?" Only moments earlier, this same group had frightened off the other diners and still hadn't paid. He was desperate, but far too afraid to demand compensation from such powerful patrons. Bibi Douluo slid the menu across the table to Shi Feng and Hu Liena. "You two choose whatever you like," she said casually. "Don't hold back." Shi Feng waved away any pretense of politeness and pointed to the priciest items. "We'll have a few of each top specialty, please." The owner and waiter hurried away, nervously whispering back in the kitchen. Not long after, Ju Douluo and Ghost Douluo returned as though they'd only stepped outside for fresh air. But Shi Feng caught a faint tinge of blood on their cloaks. He knew what that meant. The unfortunate souls who'd insulted Bibi Douluo were probably regretting it, very badly. It wasn't long before the dishes arrived. Shi Feng sampled a spoonful. Though the restaurant was modest in size, its flavors were surprisingly good. As more patrons filtered in and took their seats, the quiet hum of conversation filled the room. Bibi Dong sat unobtrusively at a corner table, drawing little notice from the others. Just then, the door swung open, and a middle-aged man stepped in, flanked by 3 teenagers. Chrysanthemum Douluo and Ghost Douluo, who had been eating nearby, looked up at once. When they recognized the newcomer, broad smiles spread across their faces. Shi Feng sensed something unusual in the way those 2 men were staring at him and his companions, so he tipped his head to follow their gaze and saw a small party entering the hotel lobby. At their center was a stocky, middle-aged man, barely 5'7" but broad-shouldered, his unremarkable face belying a surprisingly powerful presence. Flanking him were 3 boys. The tallest looked about 13, roughly Shi Feng's height, muscular and confident. Beside him waddled a chubby youngster, his round face framed by a thin mustache. His tiny, beady eyes swept the room like a predator hunting prey, and when they landed on Bibi Dong and Hu Liena in the corner, they gleamed with undisguised interest. The last boy, despite his patchy beard, was unmistakably young. His fair skin and large almond-shaped eyes gave him an almost delicate beauty, and unlike his corpulent companion, he surveyed the lobby with calm, measured curiosity rather than frantic glances. Shi Feng studied the 3 newcomers, sensing a faint tingle of recognition he couldn't place. When they entered the room, the burly middle-aged man in charge simply said, "I'm heading upstairs to rest. Help yourselves to dinner," and disappeared up the stairs. The trio of teenagers made their way to the dining area. Leading the group, a heavy-set boy picked a table with a clear view of Bibi Dong and Hu Liena. "Fatty, why'd you choose the farthest spot?" grumbled the peach-eyed youth as they slid into their seats. The chubby boy said nothing. His gaze was locked on the 2 girls, eyes burning with an almost visible intensity. Their table sat just a few feet from Shi Feng's, giving him an unobstructed view of the stunning pair as well. "Boss Dai, you covering?" the peach-eyed boy asked, nudging the tall youth at his side. Dai nodded. "Don't worry, order whatever you want." Just then, the teens felt their table legs begin to tremble. Something underneath was pushing up hard enough to make the whole table bounce. What on earth was happening? 3 tables away, a tall youth and a peach-eyed boy glared down at a nearby table. "Come on, fatty, what do you think you're doing?" the peach-eyed boy snapped, jabbing at the chubby kid for blocking the seats. "We still need a place to sit." The tall youth folded his arms and added, "Yeah, save some space for us." Wiping a smudge of grease from his chin, the chubby boy leaned in close and hissed, "Quiet, look over there, 2 first-rate beauties." The other 2 turned to follow his gaze. A few tables away, Bibi Dong and Hulina were dining gracefully, their every movement a picture of elegance. The trio couldn't help swallowing hard. "Think it's time?" the chubby boy murmured, eyes gleaming with mischief. With a sudden shove, he rattled the table they'd been eyeing. Although their voices were barely above a whisper, Shi Feng and his companions caught every word. And in that moment, Shi Feng's heart skipped a beat. He recognized those 3 brats from the Jade Peak sect, and an odd sense of unease settled over him. Shi Feng halted in surprise. "I didn't expect to run into them here, the 3 guys from Shrek Academy." Oddly, not a single elder stepped forward to stop them this time, as if they'd rolled their eyes at the idea of bullying a few teenagers. Juliana shot Shi Feng a smug look, clearly pleased with herself. It was as if she were silently announcing, "See how irresistible I am." A stout young man turned to Dai Mubai, his eyes pleading. "Boss Dai, aren't you always bragging about your Hua Kong record? 3 dates a day, dozens, maybe hundreds of conquests? I've got 2 girls here tonight. You can pick the one you like, but help me secure the other." Dai Mubai forced himself not to stare. He drew himself up, his tone cool and measured. "I never ask anyone to do what I couldn't do myself, but since you insist, consider it done." The stout man's grin widened. "With your signature scowl and those tried-and-true pickup lines, you'll have them eating out of your hand. My happiness tonight rests entirely on you, brother." "Hey, what about me?" protested Oscar, stamping his foot. At 12 years old, he'd observed Dai Mubai's cavalier dating adventures for far too long and was positively green with envy. He folded his arms, pouting. "Do I get nothing?" The stout man ruffled Oscar's hair and chuckled. "Next time, kid. Tonight, the big boys handle the action." Shi Feng glanced at his friends. This was going to be another long, unpredictable evening. Chapter 1 Lewen. "You are mediocre. Didn't Master Xiaoxue promise to take you to that place tonight to straighten things out?" Oscar teased, a knowing grin on his round face. "It'd be a shame for you to turn down 2 gorgeous women like that." Dai Mubai scowled. "Cut the crap. I've been holding back for 3 days now, and I'm about to lose it. Do you really think I enjoy twiddling my thumbs?" He clenched his fists, voice low with barely contained impatience. "I'm this close to snapping." Oscar laughed and patted him on the shoulder. "What's the big deal? Didn't Dean Flender just call you a washed-up coward who can't even stir up a little trouble? How are you ever going to become a true soul master if you don't have the guts to take a risk?" For a moment, Dai Mubai's brash bravado wavered. Oscar's words cut deeper than he expected. Over the years, he'd been with plenty of women, but none had ever stirred him the way those 2 did. They weren't just attractive, they were exceptional. As a prince of the royal family, he'd never encountered anyone like them. His pulse quickened. Whatever lay ahead tonight, he knew he couldn't back down. Not now. Not ever. Dai Mubai couldn't keep his eyes off the older woman at Shi Feng's table. She carried herself with a world-weariness and quiet confidence that made her utterly magnetic. He sighed to himself. If only I could spend an evening with someone like her. Why not try, he thought. You've got nothing to lose. If it doesn't work out, move on. If it does, all the better. Heart pounding at the daring notion, the 13-year-old sprang to his feet and strode over without another thought. In the flush of youth, he felt no need for restraint. Already a full 1.8 meters tall, Dai Mubai's long golden hair tumbled down his back. But it was his eyes, dark blue with curious double pupils, that truly made him unforgettable. Against his handsome features, they lent him an almost predatory allure, ensuring every head in the room would turn in his direction. Stopping beside Shi Feng's table, he offered a disarming smile. "Good evening," he began, voice smooth and confident. "I'm Dai Mubai. Would you mind if I joined you?" Page 145. Shi Feng knew his greatest asset was his looks. A single charming smile was usually enough to catch any girl's eye. Huliana chuckled. "Xiao Feng, this handsome gentleman isn't any worse than you. Want me to arrange for my sister to meet him?" Shi Feng rolled his eyes. "If you like him, go ahead. I don't object." He couldn't believe Huliana would fall head over heels for Dai Mubai at first sight. Dai Mubai turned to look at Shi Feng, who still had his back turned. Though he couldn't see Shi Feng's face, he offered a confident grin. "Little brother, mind if we become friends?" "I'm not interested," Shi Feng replied flatly. The smile froze on Dai Mubai's face, but only for an instant. He quickly recovered, flashing his trademark confidence. "Ladies, meeting you both must be fate. Tonight's meal is on me." Bibi Dong set down her chopsticks without so much as glancing at Dai Mubai. "Xiao Feng," she said in a clear, melodious tone. Dai Mubai's eyes lit up at her words. Shi Feng understood immediately. He rose from his seat and turned to face Dai Mubai. "Get lost." Shi Feng didn't bother with pleasantries. He was trying to enjoy dinner with his esteemed teacher and senior sister, yet Dai Mubai buzzed around like an irritating gnat. Sure, Dai Mubai was devilishly handsome, but that only made his lecherous stares at Bibi Dong and Huliana all the more intolerable. And the rotund fellow trailing behind him from the moment he arrived, with his greedy eyes, made Shi Feng's skin crawl. Being rebuked by someone younger snapped Dai Mubai's face into a scowl. His cold eyes flicked over Shi Feng. "Watch your tongue," he sneered. "Better mind how you speak." Shi Feng offered him a mocking smile. "Why don't you try that advice yourself?" Before Dai Mubai could react, Shi Feng struck him square in the chest with a solid punch. Dai Mubai staggered back, crimson flooding his cheeks. He straightened, eyes blazing with fury. "You really want to pick a fight?" he growled, every inch the fearsome white tiger in human form. Shi Feng didn't even bother to dodge. When Baihu, the white tiger disciple renowned for his unrivaled strength, threw a punch at him, he fully expected to shatter Shi Feng's arm. After all, no one in Baihu's circle had ever landed a blow on him and walked away unhurt. And truth be told, Baihu secretly regretted that those two beauties standing behind Shi Feng would never be his. But Shi Feng merely sneered, a teasing glint lighting up his eyes. In that moment, his gaze flicked over Baihu with predatory calm. Boom! A thunderous crack echoed through the hall. Shi Feng remained perfectly still, as if rooted to the spot, his chest rising and falling evenly. Baihu, by contrast, was sent hurtling backward. He spun helplessly in midair, legs kicking, until he slammed butt first into the heavy wooden tea table behind him. The table splintered beneath the impact, its lacquered surface cracking like dried ice. Without hesitation, Oscar and the burly Ma Hongjun bounded forward to help their leader to his feet. "Boss Bai, are you all right?" Oscar asked, his voice tight with concern. Baihu pushed himself up from the broken table, tea stains dripping down his once pristine robes. He braced himself against a chair, chest heaving, one hand still trembling from the shock of Shi Feng's hidden power. His eyes burned with a mixture of rage and disbelief as he stared at the unruffled young man before him. Shi Feng met his gaze evenly and smiled. The two beauties behind him exchanged startled glances. Clearly, they had just witnessed something far beyond their expectations. And now, the real contest was only just beginning. Shi Feng had never feared any rival in a strength contest, until today, when a boy younger than him sent him sprawling with a single punch. Embarrassed and furious, he clenched his fists and glared at his assailant. "Boss Dai," Ma Hongjun urged. "Don't just stand there. We've got your back. Let's show him what the three Shrek masters are made of." Oscar shook his head, stepping between them. Cool it. We were the ones who started this. Best to let it go." Ma Hongjun snorted. "Afraid of a little fight? You're just a mediocre nobody who won't stir up trouble. Besides, Teacher Zhao's right behind us. What could go wrong?" With a confident grin, Ma Hongjun strode toward Shi Feng. His gaze flicked over Bibi Dong and Huliana, who stood protectively at Shi Feng's side, then settled on Shi Feng himself. Sure, Shi Feng had just displayed impressive raw strength, but Ma Hongjun believed true power lay in one's martial soul. His own flame phoenix martial soul, he was convinced, surpassed any of his peers. No matter how strong Shi Feng might be, Ma Hongjun was certain his blazing phoenix would reign supreme. Hey now, he just wants to make friends. No need to throw punches, right? Shi Feng's face darkened. He could barely get through one meal without chaos erupting around him. Juliana sauntered over to where Ma Hongjun was still simmering with rage. She gave him a tantalizing smile and teased, "Little fatty, you've got deep pockets. If you can beat my brother, I'll spend the night with you. Sound good?" Her coquettish grin and that intoxicating aura left Ma Hongjun momentarily stunned. His eyes widened. He straightened up with sudden vigor. "Really? You mean it?" "I never lie," Juliana purred, winking at him. "And I adore a strong, dashing man like you." All restraint fled Ma Hongjun's plump face. The flush of desire burned his cheeks crimson, and he glared at Shi Feng like a starving wolf. "Fair enough," he snarled. "Your sister says you want to spar. Let's take it outside." Chapter 112, Phoenix Martial Soul. "Shi Feng, go ahead. No martial soul techniques," Bibi Dong called out abruptly. Shi Feng had originally meant to refuse, but at Bibi Dong's urging, he relented. Even without summoning his martial soul, he was more than confident he could thrash that fat oaf. "Lead the way," he said, nodding to Ma Hongjun. Shi Feng studied the roly-poly man at his side. True to every rumor, Hongjun's sole obsession was women. He never missed an opportunity to eye the prettiest faces in the room. Ma Hongjun chuckled low in his throat, practically vibrating with excitement. He couldn't have cared less whether Shi Feng unleashed his martial soul. Victory was a foregone conclusion. That sorceress Juliana would get her comeuppance before the night was out. Brimming with anticipation, he strode forward as if he'd downed a vial of some potent tonic. Halfway out the door, Ma Hongjun spotted Dai Mubai and came to an abrupt halt. "My apologies, Boss Dai," he called over his shoulder, grinning like a rogue. "I'm off to see if I can pick up a beauty tonight. You might want to see if any of these ladies fancies the company of a more experienced gentleman." With a last sidelong glance at Shi Feng, he ducked out of the hotel. Shi Feng shot Dai Mubai an icy look, then followed Ma Hongjun into the night. Oscar, brimming with excitement, tugged at Dai Mubai's sleeve. "Boss Dai, shall we go?" Dai Mubai shot Bibi Dong a meaningful glance and then led Oscar outside. "Teacher, I want to watch," Juliana exclaimed, practically bouncing to her feet. "All right, let's go together," Bibi Dong agreed, rising as well. She was just as eager to see how powerful Shi Feng could be without invoking his martial soul. After all, he would soon be heading to Tiando City to join forces with Qian Renshui. It wouldn't do to reveal the true extent of his awe-inspiring soul ring configuration so early. When they stepped into the courtyard, Shi Feng and Ma Hongjun were already facing each other, about 10 meters apart. The moment the two young men took up their duel stances, a hush fell over the spectators. Whispers swirled as onlookers pressed in, all eyes fixed on the pair. Behind Ma Hongjun, Dai Mubai and Oscar slipped unnoticed into the crowd, their expressions unreadable but keenly focused on the approaching clash. Across the way, Shi Feng's dark eyes flicked briefly to Bibi Dong, then narrowed in concentration. He lowered his shoulders slightly, a silent signal that he intended to fight clean, relying purely on skill and willpower rather than the advantage of his concealed soul rings. The tension in the air was palpable. Every spectator braced for the first move, knowing they were about to witness a duel that could very well redefine both boys' reputations. Oscar's brow furrowed in concern as he glanced between Shi Feng and Ma Hongjun. "Fatty, are you absolutely sure about this?" Ma Hongjun offered him a confident smirk, his eyes glinting like living embers. "Relax," he said. "You've never seen what my flames can do. Sure, he looks about my age, but there's no way I'll accidentally burn him alive, especially with his sister right here to raise hell if I do." Dai Mubai's voice cut in on the banter. "Don't get cocky, Fatty. There's something off about this guy. I've got a bad feeling." Ma Hongjun chuckled dismissively. "Even you, Boss Dai, are afraid of my fire. Do you really think he can stand up to it?" Shi Feng's patience snapped. "Enough talk. Let's settle this." With a few strides, Ma Hongjun closed the gap and turned to Shi Feng's sister, Juliana. He offered her a charismatic grin. "Don't worry, beauty. I won't lay a hand on your brother." Juliana leaned forward, a playful spark in her eyes. "Hurry up, big brother. I'm dying of anticipation here. You've got to give me a show. Encouraged, Ma Hongjun threw his head back and laughed heartily. Trust me, tonight I'll make sure you're more than satisfied. Then, flames dancing to life around his fists, he roared, Phoenix Possession. The very name sent a ripple of dread through the onlookers. Every spectator stiffened as the air around Ma Hongjun grew scorching hot, an omen F the inferno he was about to unleash. Among all the beast spirits, only a handful can rival the phoenix in raw power. A phoenix martial soul not only grants its wielder the ability to soar through the skies, but also unleashes devastating fire-based assaults, truly the pinnacle of offensive soul powers. Without warning, a vivid purple-red aura burst forth from Ma Hongjun's body. His fiery hair lengthened into cascading locks, and though no wings sprouted from his back, the heat radiating off him was enough to scorch the earth. 2 golden soul rings levitated beneath his feet, and thick, feathered plumage sprouted along his arms, transforming his hands into talons. The aura flared like an inferno, sending the ambient temperature skyrocketing. Hulina's brow furrowed in concern. She leaned close to their instructor and whispered, Master Bibi Dong, is he really a phoenix spirit? What about Shi Feng? Won't he be in danger? Bibi Dong regarded the transformed Ma Hongjun with a discerning gaze. By the looks of that power, even if he isn't a pure phoenix spirit, he's at least on that level. As for Shi Feng's safety, well, he's already reached spirit level 36. If he's careless, it's his own fault. He shrugged casually, neither reassured nor overly worried, as the searing aura continued to blaze around Ma Hongjun. Isn't it said you can't defeat a great soul master? Ma Hongjun sneered, glancing triumphantly at Hulina. Seeing the shock on her face, he allowed himself a self-satisfied smirk, then turned his gaze on Shi Feng. I am Ma Hongjun, Martial Soul Phoenix, a level 22 Battle Soul Master. Prepare yourself, he announced, chest puffed out as murmurs rippled through the crowd. Shi Feng returned his stare with icy calm. Ma Hongjun's audacity in hijacking Hulina's challenge demanded a harsh lesson. Flames danced around the chubby Soul Master's form, but Shi Feng barely even blinked. He'd studied Ma Hongjun's abilities thoroughly. No mere straight-line jet of fire could harm him. Sizing up Ma Hongjun's rotund frame, the crimson-purple feathers sprouting from his arms, and the wild crest atop his head, Shi Feng let a single cutting remark slip out. A fat, ugly phoenix? Please. Your so-called martial soul is nothing more than a pile of dirt. His words struck home. The assembled onlookers, already amused by Ma Hongjun's odd appearance, erupted into laughter, eager to see how the self-proclaimed phoenix would respond. Fatty's about to fly off the handle, Dai Mubai warned with a grin. Nothing gets him angrier than being called a chicken, especially in front of a crowd. True to form, Ma Hongjun's face went scarlet. Who are you calling a chicken? He roared. Before anyone could react, the first spirit ring on his martial soul glowed fiercely. Ma Hongjun threw back his head and unleashed a narrow jet of purple-red flame. The heat warped the air, the flame snaking toward Shi Feng like a living serpent. Shi Feng didn't hesitate. He slid to one side, just enough so the fire spat past him, and closed the distance in a heartbeat. If the motion had been any slower, his clothes might have caught fire. Careful, Fatty. Oscar called from behind as Shi Feng vanished into Ma Hongjun's blind spot and moved swiftly to strike back. Shi Feng shot forward like an arrow loosed from a bow, leaving a trail of wind in his wake. Behind him, Ma Hongjun spun around, his fury igniting the air as he unleashed a torrent of flames. But no matter how fiercely Ma Hongjun rained down fire, Shi Feng's speed was simply too great. He weaved and dodged, closing the distance with every bound. Seeing Shi Feng draw near, Ma Hongjun's confidence wavered. He'd dismissed Shi Feng's strength before, when Shi Feng remained just out of reach. Now, at this proximity, Shi Feng could unleash a power that even Dai Mubai would quake before. Ma Hongjun refused to be caught unprepared. In an instant, his second soul ring flared to life, and he called forth his soul skill, Phoenix in Fire. A deafening crack split the air as sheets of violent purple flame erupted from Ma Hongjun's body, soaring outward in a roaring wave 2 meters in every direction. The air itself seemed to burn. Emboldened by this surge of power, Ma Hongjun advanced, a living inferno, exhaling spouts of violet fire with each step, as though a god of flame had descended to scorch the world. Chapter 113. Shi Feng sneered. The jet of flame that burst from Ma Hongjun's mouth couldn't hope to match his lightning speed. In the blink of an eye, he appeared right before Ma Hongjun's eyes. Although Ma Hongjun had just unleashed his Phoenix on Fire skill, an ability that offers both offense and defense, Shi Feng's soul power was over 10 levels higher. His overwhelming aura easily quenched those flames. "Fatty, watch out!" Dai Mubai couldn't help shouting. If it had been him standing this close to Ma Hongjun, he'd have knocked him flat in an instant, let alone Shi Feng, who was even stronger. At the warning, Ma Hongjun's panic flared. He spat a furious gout of fire and spun around, only to catch a fleeting afterimage of Shi Feng. The speed was impossible to track. Every time Ma Hongjun whirled, Shi Feng had already slipped out of sight. A cold dread crept up his spine. Then, in the next heartbeat, something seized his arm. Startled, Ma Hongjun looked down and froze. A slender, powerful hand was gripping his paw with unyielding force. A sudden wave of force surged from Shi Feng, wrenching Ma Hongjun's arm and spinning it with sickening clicks. Ma Hongjun screamed in horror, his cry high and harrowing, like a pig at slaughter, pain so blinding he nearly passed out. Underneath that horrific popping and cracking, his arm bones splintered into shards. Before he could even catch his breath, Shi Feng grabbed his other hand and twisted it brutally. More clicks sounded as fingers bent the wrong way and flesh contorted. Then, without hesitation, Shi Feng delivered a precise kick to Ma Hongjun's rear. Ma Hongjun shot forward like a wayward rubber ball, crashing into Dai Mubai and Oscar. His scream tore through the night, rousing half the neighborhood. Across the street, on the third-floor windowsill of a hotel, a tall figure nearly lost his balance. He steadied himself, peering down at the chaos below, and muttered, "This brat, only Mubai can handle him now." Moments later, Ma Hongjun went limp and collapsed. His martial soul retracted automatically, and Dai Mubai and Oscar moved in to secure him. Both of his arms hung uselessly at his sides, jagged bone fragments protruding from mangled sleeves. In the eerie stillness that followed, only the distant sound of sirens hinted at how far-reaching Shi Feng's wrath had become. Oscar's voice rang out urgently. "Here, take this." He hastily cast a recovery spell, and a large, steaming healing sausage materialized in his hand. Only, Ma Hongjun lay unconscious, utterly unable to eat it. Without hesitation, Dai Mubai slapped his friend several times, hammering him awake. Ma Hongjun jerked upright with a savage scream, veins bulging on his forehead as his entire body shook. An arm bone was clearly broken. Every breath brought fresh agony. Oscar seized the moment and forced the healing sausage into Ma Hongjun's mouth. Moments later, the screams began to subside. Though the magical sausage old close wounds and dull pain, it wasn't powerful enough to realign shattered bones. Still, it offered significant relief. Ma Hongjun's eyes were bloodshot as he glared at Dai Mubai. "Boss Dai," he gasped, voice trembling with fury. "Banish him. Make him suffer the way I do." Dai Mubai's face hardened into a grim scowl. He knelt to support his friend, then stood, determination flashing in his eyes. "Don't worry," he said through clenched teeth. "He'll pay for this." He took a few measured steps forward, his gaze fixed on Shi Feng. "You're strong," he said, voice low and steady, "but you harmed my brother. Now I'll show you my full strength." White tiger, possession! A blinding pale light burst from his form. Bones cracked and reshaped themselves as his muscles swelled, stretching his clothes to the brink of tearing. Every sinew stood out beneath the fabric, and the very air around him hummed with feral energy. His blonde hair darkened into black and white stripes, and the character for king blazed across his forehead. The most astonishing change happened to his hands. They doubled in size and sprouted thick white fur. His fingers elongated into dagger-like claws 8 inches long, each one a gleaming blade of pure menace. They flicked and flexed as if eager to taste battle. Beneath his feet, 3 soul rings, 2 golden, 1 violet, surfaced and began to orbit him. A surge of soul force radiated outward like tidal waves, sending tremors through the earth. "A 1,000-year soul ring," the onlookers exclaimed in unison. He was barely more than a youth, yet he stood before them as a full-fledged soul master, a living testament to raw power. Bibi Dong's eyes flickered as she studied the distant disturbance. The Star Luo imperial family's white tiger martial spirit has unexpectedly entered the Heaven Dew Empire. Huliana's heart skipped. "Teacher, is Shi Feng in danger?" Bibi Dong allowed herself a small, confident smile. He never even uses his martial spirit while at the academy, and for someone bold enough to challenge the spirit hall itself, do you really think he's in trouble? Still, the worry in Lena's eyes refused to fade. Everyone knew how legendary the White Tiger martial spirit was. What if this newcomer proved stronger than Shi Feng? On the academy's training grounds, a fierce aura crackled through the air. Dai Mubai's gaze bore into Shi Feng with undisguised challenge. "You've got skill," he said, voice low and even. "Now show me your true strength. Unleash your martial spirit." Shi Feng shook his head calmly. "I don't need a martial spirit to handle you." His refusal stung Dai Mubai's pride. He bristled, eyes narrowing to slits. "Then I'll do the talking." He straightened, voice cold and commanding. "Dai Mubai, martial spirit, White Tiger, level 32 battle spirit venerable, I await your counsel." No sooner had the words left his lips than the ground trembled. White and black energy swirled around Dai Mubai, coalescing into the fearsome visage of a great tiger. In the blink of an eye, the tiger-blooded fighter closed the distance to Shi Feng, every step radiating raw, explosive power. Shi Feng barely had a moment's warning before 10 dagger-sharp claws shot out of Dai Mubai's fingers and raked toward him. In that instant, Shi Feng's eyes darkened to midnight black. A feral power coalesced around his fist, and with a single thunderous blow he shattered Dai Mubai's grip. Dai Mubai's own claws lashed out again, even fiercer than before, but the two forces collided so brutally that a blinding clang echoed through the air, and Dai Mubai was hurled backward by the recoil. What froze him in terror was the sight of his claws clamped around Shi Feng's fist as though he'd seized a block of tempered steel. Sparks flew, and though Shi Feng's skin bore only faint white scratches, his hand remained entirely unscathed. Dai Mubai, meanwhile, staggered as pain seared through his ravaged claws, which threatened to splinter. What kind of monster was this? "Not bad," Shi Feng murmured, flexing his unbroken hand. "Quite strong." Dai Mubai's arms trembled. Only now did he finally grasp the truth. This young man, who looked almost boyish beside him, had already surpassed him in strength. Shi Feng watched Dai Mubai's second soul ring flare to life, and a thunderous roar echoed as a brilliant white light condensed in the beastman's jaws. "White Tiger Spirit Wave," he bellowed, unleashing a milky orb of raw energy that hurtled toward Shi Feng. But Shi Feng had already slipped away. In an instant, he seemed to vanish into thin air, and the orb smashed into the earth where he just stood, tearing a 2-meter-wide crater in the ground. A calm, mocking voice drifted from every direction at once. "Impressive power," Shi Feng said, "but it's exactly the same as that fat man's technique, far too slow." Dai Mubai's face turned ashen. The boy's speed was staggering. One misstep now could be fatal. With a growl, he slammed his fist to his chest and summoned his third soul ring. White Tiger King Kong Transformation. A golden aura erupted around him as his already massive form swelled to even greater heights. His muscles bulged, shredding his clothes, while dark stripes appeared across his pale skin. His hands reshaped into enormous tiger paws, silver claws gleaming in the light. Blood-red eyes glared out from his bestial visage, every ounce of his aura exuding the ruthless dominance of a true king of beasts. Chapter 114. The Enraged Zhao Wuqi, Lightning Fist. A fist wreathed in crackling electricity tore through the air as if summoned from nowhere. Shi Feng's figure followed its trajectory, every sinew coiled and ready to unleash raw power. In a thunderous roar, his electrified punch drove straight for Dai Mubai's chest. The speed was blinding. Dai Mubai barely had time to register the attack before instinctively crossing his forearms in front of his torso. Yet even that desperate defense could not withstand the assault. Shi Feng's punch exploded against his arms with the force of a charging spirit beast. Energy rippled outward in jagged arcs, and Dai Mubai felt bones grind beneath the onslaught. He'd funneled every ounce of soul power into his guard, but it was as if his limbs were made of clay. Under Shi Feng's fist, his steel-like muscles buckled, and a sharp crack rang through the air. Then, as though flung by a slingshot, Dai Mubai was sent sprawling backward, crashing onto the ground with an earth-shaking thud. From the sidelines, an ominous tension thickened the air. The enraged Zhao Wuqi was about to make his move. Searing pain shot through his arms, and his chest tightened as the soul energy within him scattered and roiled. threatening to devour him from the inside out. Worse still, Shi Feng tracked him with inhuman swiftness, trailing his inverted form like a predatory shadow. Before he could catch his breath, that terrible fist came crashing toward his torso once more. If it landed, the damage to his internal organs would be catastrophic. His arms were still reeling from the previous blow. He had no strength left to block this one. Suspended upside down with his feet off the ground, he had nowhere to anchor himself. Panic clawed at his mind, until abruptly the first soul ring on his aura flared to life. The soul skill White Tiger Barrier activated, and a brilliant white glow burst forth, coalescing into a sturdy ethereal shield around him. Shi Feng's eyes gleamed with excitement. He drew back his arm and summoned every ounce of his power into the next punch. The instant his fist slammed against the barrier, a shockwave rippled through the air, but the White Tiger Barrier did not budge. Not a single crack appeared on its luminous surface as it repelled Shi Feng's strike. One punch isn't enough? Then make it 3. Daimubai's eyes snapped wide as Shi Feng's fist blurred through the air. He couldn't track the blow. All he felt was his White Tiger body barrier shuddering under a storm of force. In a single breath, Shi Feng had unleashed his skill, hammering him with blow after blow. Propelled by sheer impact, Daimubai rocketed away from the crowd, his speed climbing with every hit. Then came a final, shattering crack. His mask, groaning under the pressure, splintered to pieces just as Shi Feng's lightning-charged fist drove straight for his chest. Daimubai's arms trembled back to life, but his legs dragged him along the ground, useless for resistance. He skidded backward, unable even to steady himself under Shi Feng's relentless barrage. Another fist descended. Summoning the last of his strength, Daimubai slammed his gauntleted hand up to meet it. The residue of his White Tiger Vajra transformation flared within him, doubling his attack power, bolstering his defenses, and amplifying every sinew of his strength. The two titans collided in a thunderous clash of power, and only one would remain standing. Though Daimubai's strength and defenses had doubled, they stood no chance against Shi Feng's onslaught. In a single, fluid motion, Shi Feng's first 3 blows shattered Daimubai's arm like a brittle branch. The fourth strike slammed into his chest with bone-crushing force, driving the wind from his lungs. Blood spurted from Daimubai's mouth as he was flung through the air, tumbling head over heels. Shi Feng pressed the attack, closing the distance with blistering speed, until a single thunderous voice cut through the chaos. "Stop!" The earth quaked beneath them, as if a mountain had struck the ground. Shi Feng froze immediately, recognizing that power in the tone. Apart from Zhao Wuji, whose name alone inspired awe, no one could wield such force. Now it made sense why even Daimubai had proven no match, and why Zhao Wuji had not appeared until this moment. A cold smile curved Shi Feng's lips as he lowered his fists. Daimubai might not be as repulsive as that corpulent cad who preyed on women, but by daring to target Bibi Dong, he had sealed his own fate. Shi Feng's fists pummeled Daimubai's chest without mercy. In the space of a heartbeat, 5 or 6 savage blows landed, and blood spurted wildly from each crushing impact. "How dare you!" Zhao Wuji's eyes blazed with rage, veins throbbing in his temples. 7 ethereal soul rings manifested around him, each one glowing with fierce energy. In the next instant, his frame expanded at an astonishing rate. What had been a wiry figure under 1.7 meters now towered well over 2 meters. Thick brown hair bristled across bulging muscles, and his deep brown eyes radiated an irrepressible dominance. His arms ballooned, hands transforming into massive, fan-like paws that seemed capable of crushing boulders. At the same moment, he unleashed his martial spirit. The 3rd and 5th spirit rings flared to life, activating both gravity enhancement and gravity constriction in unison. A crushing wave of weight slammed into the onlookers, driving many to their knees before they could even react. Shi Feng was hit hardest of all. He felt the invisible force multiply around him, dragging at his limbs, slowing his footfalls, and sapping the strength from his strikes. On top of that, an almost tangible pressure pressed in from every direction, as if the very air were trying to squeeze him into dust. Under that unbearable weight, Shi Feng struggled to draw breath and brace himself for whatever would come next. Shi Feng's body trembled, the residual energy of his own technique coursing through him like iron bands. Before he could free himself, Zhao Wuji strode forward and knelt beside Dai Mubai, hauling him to his feet. Dai's face was ashen. Only moments ago, Shi Feng's relentless barrage had battered him to the brink, even injuring his internal organs. "What kind of merciless brat are you?" Zhao Wuji hissed, glaring down at Shi Feng. "Did you mean to wipe them out completely?" At that instant, Oscar lunged forward, shoving a massive sausage into Dai Mubai's mouth to help him swallow something, anything to staunch the bleeding. Meanwhile, an invisible force held Shi Feng frozen in place. It was powerful enough to immobilize him, yet it inflicted no mortal wounds. A bitter smile curved on Shi Feng's lips. "Ruthless? Compared to you, once lauded as the infamous Fudo King Zhao Wuji in the Soul Master's world, no one's more ruthless than you." Zhao Wuji's eyes flashed. Recognition and indignation flared in his gaze. "Who do you think you are? What sect do you belong to?" He stood over Shi Feng, far calmer than the impetuous young man he used to be. Still, he dared not kill Shi Feng outright, wary now of the stranger's true power and the secrets he might hide. Shi Feng's voice remained calm, even teasing. "You know, if you push any harder, you'll unleash a force so terrible that it won't stop with me. It'll sweep through all of Shrek Academy. Me? I'm just a nobody with no family, no sect. Still worried about my background, Zhao Wuji? I've already put 2 of your disciples on the ground, and you're still hanging back. That's not the fearless Zhao Wuji I've heard about." Nearby, Ma Hongjun's anger exploded. "Master Zhao, break his hands and feet. Let him know what it feels like to be broken." "Silence." Zhao Wuji shot him a deadly glance. If it weren't for Ma Hongjun's uncontrollable lust, none of this would have happened. Under that glare, Ma Hongjun fell mute, shrinking back. Zhao Wuji's eyes flicked past Shi Feng to where Bibi Dong and Hu Lina stood on the sidelines. Their beauty was astonishing, and now he understood why Ma Hongjun had lost his head. Any man's discipline would crack when faced with such perfection, let alone a young hothead like Hongjun. Chapter 115, Tragic Ending. Under his scrutiny, the woman in her 20s showed no trace of soul power. She was clearly an ordinary mortal. But the teenage girl, though her aura was faint, was unmistakably a soul master of at least level 20. That young? Zhao Wuji's eyes widened in shock. His earlier certainty that Shi Feng was no ordinary youth only deepened. The soul power Shi Feng had unleashed in their duel had already placed him firmly in the soul master realm. If these 2 disciples weren't backed by some powerful organization, there was no way he could have even stood a chance against him, let alone hoped to kill him. For a moment, Zhao Wuji's murderous intent flared, but he forced it down. Shi Feng had just declared his identity. Were Zhao Wuji to slay him now in plain sight, the forces backing Shi Feng would surely send reinforcements, and then Zhao Wuji really would have nowhere to hide. Still, he couldn't simply let Shi Feng walk away while his 2 students lay broken. How would he ever face them again? Steeling himself, Zhao Wuji turned his piercing gaze on the boy at his feet. "Boy," he asked, voice deceptively calm, "where are your parents?" "There's no need to be so cautious," Shi Feng said coolly. "My parents didn't come, only my 2 older sisters. What, are you afraid?" His blunt words made Zhao Wuji's veins throb with anger. "Fine," Zhao Wuji sneered. "Then I'll teach you a lesson your parents won't see coming. There's a price for running wild." He touched the second soul ring on his arm, causing it to glow. A golden aura spread over his palm, doubling its size in an instant as he swung it toward the immobilized Shi Feng. Not far away, Ma Hongjun let out a triumphant laugh. Dai Mubai's expression was more conflicted. Being challenged by someone so much younger, then forced to call for reinforcements, stung his pride. But Shi Feng simply stared at the oncoming blow, utterly calm, a faint, playful smile tugging at his lips. At that unexpected expression, Zhao Wuji hesitated, his massive golden hand stalling in midair. At that moment, Zhao Wuji's heart thundered in his chest as an oppressive force, like a mountain crashing from the sky, slammed into him. The soul techniques he'd unleashed on Shi Feng shattered in an instant. Seizing the opportunity, Shi Feng staggered back and took cover behind Bibi Dong. Zhao Wuji's eyes widened as Bibi Dong's guardian stepped forward. The man was broad-shouldered and barely 2 meters tall, yet the aura he exuded was so overwhelming it felt as though the very earth pressed down on Zhao Wuji's shoulders. Instinctively, his legs gave way beneath him. "A title do!" Zhao Wuji gasped. voice choked with panic. As a soul saint over level 70, he knew that no mere contra could force him to his knees by brute strength alone. Only a titled Douluo possessed that kind of absolute power. Anger flared in Zhao Wuji's eyes as realization dawned. That wretched brat lied to me, said there were no elders present, he snarled through gritted teeth. Yet even as he seethed, a cold dread coiled in his gut. By provoking a titled Douluo, he, and the 3 other students here to confess today, had stepped into far more danger than they'd ever imagined. Dai Mubai and the others went pale, and Ma Hongjun was so terrified he fainted on the spot. Roar! Zhao Wuji bellowed, his spirit avatar flaring to life. In an instant, he swelled to 12 meters tall, his bulging muscles transforming him from man into something resembling a spirit beast, a formidable Vajra bear. But before he could advance, a commanding figure appeared. Shi Feng strode forward with calm precision. Though diminutive beside the towering beast, he radiated an unmistakable oppressive aura. He made no visible gesture to summon his own martial spirit. Instead, the raw force of his spirit power surged outward like a tidal wave. In one seamless motion, Shi Feng drove his open palm into Zhao Wuji's chest. The impact reverberated through the clearing, leaving every onlooker breathless. Shi Feng's palm came down like a falling mountain. No warning, no hesitation. Zhao Wuji lifted his arm to block, but the bone-crushing impact shattered his forearm instantly. Before he could recover, another blow drove into his rock-hard chest, crushing ribs like brittle pottery. Blood sprayed from Zhao's mouth as he spat out a crimson mist. With a single strike, his internal organs were battered, his Wuhun state collapsing under the trauma. He shrank back into his human form, powerless and gasping. Shi Feng stepped back, his voice cold and unruffled. Consider this your lesson. Now get out. Zhao Wuji's face went ashen. He scrambled to his feet, supporting Ma Hongjun, who was still unconscious, and bowed frantically. Thank you, Senior, for your mercy. Behind him, Oscar and Dai Mubai each grasped one of Ma Hongjun's arms, and the 3 fled in terrified silence. Shi Feng watched them vanish into the night, his expression unreadable. He felt a flicker of pity. These men had assumed they might slip away unscathed. But out here, in the heart of the heavenly Dew Empire, even a tiny hamlet bristled with soldiers and patrols. A public murder would bring officials swarming immediately. They might not fear Shi Feng himself, but they were certain to find far more trouble than they bargained for. The crowd scattered like startled birds, still trembling from the crushing presence of the titled Douluos. No one dared stay behind. They looked as if they wished they could sprout extra legs and flee faster. Bibi Dong turned calmly to Douluo. Who exactly is this soul sage? What's his background? Chrysanthemum Douluo, Douluo, smiled with contempt. He's nothing but a stray mutt. Shi Feng is ruthless. 8 years ago, he rose to Soul Emperor and openly defied the Spirit Hall. I ordered 16 Soul Emperor-level bishops in white to hunt him down. He used every trick in the book to break their encirclement and slip away, and then vanished without a trace. I never imagined we'd run into him here today. Shi Feng had never encountered the Spirit Hall's inner circle before, so he couldn't have recognized Bibi Dong or the elders. Douluo, however, knew him the instant he entered. Bibi Dong's voice turned steely. Clearly, he's a dangerous opponent. Since there's bad blood between us, we might as well settle this cleanly. Agreed. Douluo sneered and drifted back into position. The brief skirmish ruined any appetite Shi Feng and his friends still had. Begrudgingly, they left the ground floor and went up the stairs. Master Bibi Dong's chamber was hushed except for the soft rustle of robes and the measured footsteps of her 2 disciples. Bibi Dong looked approvingly at Shi Feng. Your performance was outstanding. You have solid combat experience. When the Soul Saint pressed you, you stayed calm and focused. That level of mental composure is exactly what I expect. Turning to Lena, she continued, and you, senior sister, should learn from your junior brother. Charm and your soul arts are valuable, but they can fail. If that ever happens, the only thing that will save you is real battlefield experience. Lena bowed. Yes, teacher, I understand. Shi Feng stepped forward. Teacher, don't worry about her. I'll help Lena build up her fighting skills. Bibi Dong smiled. Good. You both need a lot more practice, but I'm confident you'll master it soon. Now, off you go. I'm going to bathe and rest. Thank you, teacher, they said in unison before slipping out of the room. In the quiet corridor, Lena fell in step beside Shi Feng, her expression troubled. Feng, I'm sorry about earlier. I shouldn't have started that fight and put you in danger. When the Soul Saint targeted you, my heart almost stopped. Shi Feng offered her a reassuring smile. Don't worry about it. We're here to learn and improve. Just stay focused next time. Lena nodded, visibly relieved. Together they walked down the hall, determined to hone both their souls and their swords in preparation for whatever challenges lay ahead. Shi Feng shook his head, firmly. That's not your concern. Even if you never show interest in that little fat man, I'd still step in. You're my senior sister. I won't let anyone insult you, not with words or glances. Juliana felt a warm flush at his words. Thank you. I'll try to rest early. We have a long journey tomorrow. She hesitated for a moment, still uneasy about Bibi Dong's presence next door, but with Shi Feng's protection in mind, she reluctantly returned to her chamber to practice and rest. Chapter 116. Arriving at the Sunset Forest. Morning light crept through the paper windows as Shi Feng sat cross-legged, cultivating quietly in his room. About half an hour later, a knock sounded on the door of Bibi Dong's suite next door. Curious, he rose and crossed the corridor, only to find Douluo staggering back into the hall, a fresh scar running across his left shoulder. Senior Ju, what happened to you? Shi Feng asked, his brow knitting in concern. At the sound of movement, others in the nearby rooms, among them Ghost Douluo, emerged to see Douluo's injury. Ghost Douluo's face went pale. Old Chrysanthemum, are you all right? Where did you get hurt? Douluo pressed a hand to his wound, wincing. I ran into Xiaoxue. He's stronger than reports claimed. His hidden cultivation nearly caught me off guard. I managed to escape, but not without cost. Shi Feng exchanged a tense glance with Ghost Douluo. Xiaoxue? He still roams free? Douluo nodded grimly. He's headed east, toward the Sunset Forest. We can't let him gain any more strength. If he makes it into those ancient woodlands, he'll be impossible to track. Shi Feng's eyes narrowed. Then we leave at once. Prepare your gear. We'll pursue him into the Sunset Forest and settle this for good. As the small party hurried to gather their weapons and supplies, a hush fell over the compound. The next step of their journey was about to begin, and deep in the red-tinged canopy of the Sunset Forest, a deadly confrontation awaited. Shi Feng barely had time to take in the scene before Bibi Dong's summons echoed through the corridor. Come in and report. The doors swung open of their own accord, admitting the four titled Douluo, Chrysanthemum Douluo included, and Shi Feng himself. Even Lena, curious at the commotion, slipped out of her room to trail behind them. Inside, a pale glow from moonlight filtered through the latticed windows, illuminating Bibi Dong as she floated gracefully beside a low, ornate bed. Upon it lay Douluo, also known as Chrysanthemum Douluo, his violet robes torn and stained with blood. Bibi Dong's serene face was creased with concern as she motioned for silence and asked, Explain exactly what happened. Chrysanthemum Douluo attempted a weak smile, wincing as he shifted. My wound isn't life-threatening, he began, voice tight with frustration. But the mission failed. I was unable to eliminate Xiaoxue and the rest. Shi Feng's eyes narrowed. Mission failed? He echoed, exchanging a glance with Juliana. Bibi Dong's brow furrowed. How could anyone defeat you? She demanded. Douluo's gaze darkened with reluctant respect. He calls himself the Seven-Killing Sword, he said softly. He showed up unexpectedly, just as I was about to strike. He recognized me immediately, and he was prepared. The Seven-Killing Sword? Bibi Dong's lips parted in astonishment. His reputation says no one can match him. No wonder your injury is so severe. But what brought him here, of all places? Chrysanthemum Douluo shook his head, clutching the bedrail. I don't know. He simply passed through the salon's grounds. The moment I moved to finish Xiaoxue, he intercepted me. Too fast, too precise. A hush fell over the chamber as Bibi Dong rose, her robes swirling like mist. Shi Feng glanced at Juliana, both of them understanding at once that a new and dangerous player had appeared on their stage. Ghost Douluo's voice rang out with solemn authority. So it really is him, old Chrysanthemum. Let's go after him. Together there's nothing to fear. Bibi Dong shot him a dismissive glance. No need. We have our mission, and he's probably slipped too far ahead for you to catch him anyway. Save your sword strike vengeance for later. As for those weaklings, there's no harm in letting them live. With no one left to argue, the two withdrew. Shi Feng returned to his chamber, mind still reeling. How had the members of Shrek managed to slip past Douluo's watchful eye? Were they, like Tang San, somehow fated to follow him all the way to Godhood? He shook his head. He didn't believe in luck or destiny. If he hadn't arrived on the Douluo continent, then with Tang San's help, the Shrek 7 would indeed have become gods. But Shi Feng had altered everything. His power had soared within the spirit hall, and soon the Icefire Duality Eye would belong to him alone. What chance did those 7 stand against that? Forget about it. The Douluo continent would be dull without the Shrek 7. I'm dying to see where they end up, Shi Feng said with a grin. A trace of arrogance flickered across his face. After all, with his current confidence and strength, Tang San was no longer keeping pace. Why should he worry? 5 days later, the team finally reached the edge of Sunset Forest. Situated 100 miles east of Tiando City, this wood is one of the major wild soul beast habitats in the Heavenly Do Empire. Though not as vast as the Star Do Great Forest, its dense thickets harbor countless high-level soul beasts. It was also the secluded domain of poison Douluo Dugubo. At the forest's fringe, Bibi Dong surveyed the tree line and asked, "Xiao Feng, where's that peculiar spot you told us about?" Shi Feng paused to gather his thoughts, then replied, "There's a lone mountain rising about 500 meters above the forest floor. Dugubo has it surrounded with his poison formation. Find that peak, and you'll find what we're looking for." Chrysanthemum Douluo chuckled. "That's child's play. Old Ghost and I tangled with Dugubo before. We know his poison traps inside and out." "He slipped away by luck back at the start," Bibi Dong murmured, eyes narrowing as she surveyed the forest edge. "But I didn't expect him to hole up here." She turned to her 2 strongest lieutenants. "Chrysanthemum Douluo, Ghost Douluo, move in and flush him out. When you locate our target, proceed with caution. No unnecessary risks." At her command, Chrysanthemum Douluo and Ghost Douluo nodded in unison and vanished into the thick foliage. Nearby, 2 titled Douluo elders took up defensive positions around Bibi Dong and Shi Feng, their vigilant gazes sweeping the tree line for any sign of movement. "Master," Juliana spoke up hesitantly, "are you truly planning to recruit Dugubo again? A poison Douluo like him is volatile. He's nearly as likely to wound us as join us." Bibi Dong folded her arms, a thoughtful expression playing on her lips. "It's true Dugubo ranks lower than most titled Douluo, but his command of poisons is peerless. He's ideal for large-scale assaults. If we can win his loyalty, armies and cities will fall before us almost on command. Our expansion would skyrocket." Shi Feng glanced into the silent forest, then back at his mentor. "He's proud and unpredictable. Convincing him to submit won't be easy, and there's a real chance we might be forced to slay him in the end." A slow, confident smile curved Bibi Dong's lips as she regarded her young disciple. "You have a solution, Shi Feng?" "I do," Shi Feng said, meeting her gaze unwaveringly. "Trust me, I can persuade Dugubo to stand with us." Bibi Dong raised an eyebrow in curiosity. "Very well. Prove to me you can do what no one else has managed." Shi Feng offered a knowing smile. "You'll see soon enough." The others slipped into the shade of the forest and waited, silent and alert. Thanks to the strength of Douluo and Ghost Douluo, both titled Douluo, it wasn't hard to pinpoint the mountain with though in the relatively small confines of Sunset Forest. An hour later, the 2 emerged and hastened back to where Bibi Dong awaited them. "Pope," Douluo reported, bowing respectfully. "We've located the place. Dugubo has surrounded it with poison formations. Anyone below Soul Douluo rank won't be able to pass." "Is Dugubo inside?" Bibi Dong asked. Chrysanthemum Douluo shook her head. "I sense no soul aura. He's not there." Bibi Dong rose to her feet and pointed toward the distant peak. "Then, let's go." Under Douluo's guidance, the group set off at a brisk pace. 30 minutes later, they reached the base of the mountain. Wicked tendrils of toxic energy wreathed the slopes, evidence of Dugubo's lethal traps. Yet with Bibi Dong leading the way, they slid through each formation as if walking on air. Cradling Hulina in her arms, she ushered them safely onto the mountain's rocky face. Shi Feng paused at the edge of the clearing and glanced back at the others. He offered them a calm, confident smile, then deliberately let go of his lightning wings and strode straight into the poison formation. Almost the instant his boots touched the stone floor, thin tendrils of violet mist curled up around him, coiling over his skin like living ink. "Master! Xiaochen, watch out!" cried Hu Lina, her eyes widening in alarm. "That's the poison array set by a titled Douluo. Why is he just walking right in?" Bibi Dong, reclining on a nearby boulder, merely chuckled. "You've forgotten that Shi Feng's martial soul is itself a potent toxin. These surface poisons won't even faze him." Shi Feng felt the purple vapor seep into his pores, but it didn't surge through his veins all at once. He recalled the passage in the ancient treatise. This particular venom was deceptively mild at first touch, yet insidiously cruel. It lay dormant for a full hour before erupting, convulsing the body, contracting the meridians, and leaving death in its wake. Unless one possessed power beyond the Contra realm to expel it. He allowed the mist to swirl around him as he continued forward, every step measured and unhurried. Even as invisible toxins slithered through his flesh, Shi Feng's expression remained serene. His poison-infused martial soul would neutralize the formation's venom long before it could take hold. And when the hour was up, only his enemies would pay the price. Chapter 117. Shi Feng closed his eyes and turned his senses inward. He detected the lingering purple toxin lodged deep in his body, but to his relief, it was already dissipating, absorbed by his own energies and neutralized before it could do any lasting harm. With no trace of the poison left to worry about, he straightened up and strode on. It wasn't long before he found Bibi Dong waiting for him at the edge of the clearing. Her eyes were wide with concern. "Xiao Feng, are you all right?" she asked, rushing forward. Shi Feng offered a small smile and shook his head, as if to clear away any lingering pain. "I'm fine," he replied calmly. He would have understood if his former adversary, Dugu Bo, had felt any hesitation about pressing the attack, but the toxin embedded in his formation had been far too weak to pose a true threat. The other alchemists slipped past the poison formation under the elder's guidance. "Let's go," Shi Feng said, vaulting forward and taking the lead. The mountain before them soared nearly 500 meters into the sky, its face almost vertical. Yet Shi Feng climbed it as effortlessly as if he were walking on level ground, covering the steep distance in a matter of moments. The sun was at its zenith, and its heat beat down mercilessly. Even with their advanced cultivation, everyone broke into a heavy sweat. 10 minutes later, Shi Feng reached the summit and paused. One by one, the others emerged behind him, Hu Liana bringing up the rear, her forehead slick with perspiration and her breath ragged. They stood on the rim of an enormous, inverted cone depression carved into the mountain's peak. From its depths rose waves of scorching heat that coalesced into a thick, white mist, obscuring whatever lay below. The air was heavy with humidity and carried the sharp tang of sulfur. Shi Feng surveyed the scene and nodded. "This is exactly the place I described." Hu Liana leaned over the edge, her eyes shining with curiosity. "Feng," she called softly, "is this the spot you mentioned?" Shi Feng stood at the cliff's edge and peered down into the swirling mist. "It's just below us. Let's go." Ghost Douluo nodded. "I'll scout ahead," he said, and without a sound he leapt off the cliff. Thanks to his Douluo tier strength, the drop posed no risk to him. A few minutes later, he reappeared at the bottom. "It's safe down here. No traps." Bibi Dong gave a confident nod. "Feng, I'm leaving this to you," she announced, then stepped gracefully off the cliff. With so many eyes watching, she couldn't afford a wardrobe mishap by revealing her spirit bone's flight ability. One after another, the 4 elders helped the alchemists descend. These seasoned herbalists had decades of experience. They knew exactly how to harvest without damaging a single medicinal vein. A thick white mist rolled up from below, obscuring the landing. Hu Lina leaned forward, squinting into the fog. "Feng," she called down, voice tinged with anxiety, "how do you plan to get me down? It looks awfully steep from here." Shi Feng surveyed the shrouded drop and took a steadying breath. "Don't worry," he answered. "I've got a way." He motioned for his companions to wait as he prepared the descent, and the real work of gathering the rare herbs began. Shi Feng stared up at the cliff face above them. By himself, he could have leapt down as effortlessly as any titled Douluo. His body mastery was more than enough to handle the fall. But Hu Liana wasn't so sure-footed. With a soft exhalation, he summoned his lightning wings. In an instant, 2-meter-wide wings crackling with blue-white arcs of electricity unfurled behind him, their power illuminating Huliena's startled features. Her eyes went wide, glittering with excitement. "They're amazing," she breathed, utterly captivated by the luminous wings. Shi Feng suppressed a smile. "Hold on tight." He grasped her arm firmly and stepped off the narrow ledge. For a moment, Juliana squealed and flailed, then closed her eyes and pressed herself against him as they dropped into the swirling white mist below. The wind whipped past them, and Juliana's grip only tightened. Fear had clouded her mind until they touched down on a soft patch of grass, the world suddenly silent again. She blinked, her pulse still racing, while Shi Feng rose easily to his feet. Before them lay a hidden valley, shrouded in gentle fog. At its center, a perfect circle of steamy water lay nestled among smooth, moss-covered stones, a natural hot spring. The mist above it glowed faintly in the dying light, promising warmth and refuge. Shi Feng offered Juliana a reassuring nod. "We've arrived. Come on, let's see what this place has to offer." Together, they stepped forward, the tension of their descent melting away in the soft hiss of the hot spring's steam. Shi Feng stood at the edge of the pool, eyes widening in astonishment. The hot spring wasn't large, but no one could have anticipated its two-toned waters. On one side, the liquid glowed a deep vermilion, steam rising in billows of heat. On the other, it was a milky white, so cold that frost formed on its surface. Where the two currents met, vapor twisted and danced like a living thing. "It really exists," Shi Feng murmured, hardly believing his own eyes. He glanced around the banks of the ice-fire dual spring and froze. Everywhere he looked, rare elixirs and heavenly herbs carpeted the ground, life-blooming plants said to appear only in legends. Suddenly he barked, "Stop!" At once, a dozen alchemists darted forward, eager to harvest the treasures. Shi Feng's heart pounded. Many of those herbs required delicate handling or special picking techniques, lest their potency be ruined. He had intended these miracles for himself and a few trusted friends, not to hand them over to a crowd of strangers. "Stand back!" he shouted again, striding between the spring and the intruders. His voice was steel. "Anyone who touches a single leaf will answer to me." The enchanters halted mid-sprint, uncertain. Shi Feng squared his shoulders, determined to guard every ounce of magic these waters had to offer. The old alchemists exchanged uneasy glances. One of them finally spoke up. "With our level of skill, refining these fairy herbs into pills would be a waste. Their potency is far greater when eaten fresh." They hesitated, eyes flicking warily between Shi Feng and Bibi Dong, until at last Bibi Dong gave the order. "Return to camp. Now." Grumbling, the alchemists filed away, stealing longing glances at the vibrant plants glowing amid the forest floor. Once they were out of earshot, Bibi Dong turned to Shi Feng. "Shi Feng, shall we gather some of these herbs?" Shi Feng studied the blossoms for a moment, then met her gaze. "Teacher, would you mind if I picked a few myself?" he asked hesitantly. Bibi Dong considered him briefly, then inclined her head. "Go ahead." No sooner had she spoken than the departing alchemists, still lingering at the edge of the clearing, called out in alarm. "Your Majesty the Pope, these herbs are priceless. Surely we shouldn't just—" Their words died on their lips as Bibi Dong fixed them with a steely, imperious stare. The three men fell silent, unable to deny her command, while Shi Feng stepped forward to carefully harvest the luminous fairy herbs. Shi Feng stepped forward toward the neatly arranged elixirs, a thrill of anticipation running through him. Before him lay rows of vials filled with deadly toxins and potent tonics, some genuine, others painstakingly transplanted here by Douluo Bo. Shi Feng's gaze settled on a single, large, pale pink blossom. Flipping through the alchemy manual in his mind, he recognized it at once. The Yuxiang Qiluo immortal flower, the sworn enemy of every poison. Its delicate scent created an impenetrable barrier against toxins. Any venom within its fragrant radius was rendered harmless, though it could not cure someone already poisoned. With a steady hand, Shi Feng plucked the rare flower and slipped it into his storage soul tool. Instantly, the circle of alchemists around him flushed with envy. Only moments earlier, they had agreed they'd have seized that very bloom, had Shi Feng not driven them back with his sharp reprimand. One of them dared to protest. "Sect leader." "Silence!" Bibi Dong cut in brusquely. She fixed her gaze on the disgruntled alchemist. He's the one who taught you your alchemy techniques. He's the one who led us here safely. You'd do well to remember that. Aren't these elixirs already proving their worth? The alchemists fell silent, mouths agape. Bibi Dong's words left them speechless. The moment everyone realized that miraculous alchemy technique had come from him, all their lingering doubts vanished. They looked at Shi Feng with newfound admiration, and already quietly resolved that, when time allowed, they would beg him to teach them the secrets of his craft. Juliana, Douluo, and the others were equally stunned. They knew full well how potent those pills were, but none of them had ever guessed they were forged by Shi Feng's hand. Shi Feng barely noticed their astonished stares. He wove his way around the ice-fire twin fissure, gathering every herb the manuscript had marked immortal. Along the way, he even uncovered a handful of strange elixirs entirely absent from the text, each pulsing with an extraordinary aura, and tucked them carefully into his pouch. With each step closer to the fissure, the blistering heat and piercing cold intensified, like poisonous breaths of flame and frost. Even Shi Feng felt a tightening in his chest if he lingered too long. After half an hour, he finally paused at the edge of the rift, surveying both sides of the chasm with a measured, thoughtful gaze. Chapter 118. Hulina Takes Medicine. On opposite banks of the valley, one frigid, the other searing, grew two extraordinary fairy herbs. The first, star anise mystic ice grass, thrived beside the ice-cold spring. Its bloom formed an 8-petaled snow-white flower, each stamen glittering like an ice crystal. But hidden within its beauty lay a lethal chill poison so fierce that only a golden iron sickle could sever it without injury. Across the way, by the boiling yangquan, stood the lihuo fire cabbage root. Its leaves flared a vivid crimson, folding in on themselves like a blazing cabbage. This herb, too, carried a venomous flame poison of the highest order. Neither Shi Feng nor any ordinary cultivator could withstand either toxin alone, not even he, burdened with residual poisons in his body. Their only salvation lay in harvesting and consuming both herbs simultaneously. The opposing forces of fire and ice would neutralize one another, but only for 10 breaths. If he failed to swallow them within that narrow window, their combined poisons would break free with devastating force. Once fully absorbed, the combined properties of these two herbs will fundamentally transform one's body, granting true immunity to both ice and fire, and rendering the user impervious to every poison. Shi Feng didn't rush to harvest them. Instead, he walked over to Bibi Dong. "Feng, are you ready?" she asked. Shi Feng shook his head. "Not yet. These two immortal herbs are exceptionally lethal, deadly even to a titled Douluo. But if you take them together, their poisons will neutralize each other. Once the body fully assimilates their medicinal power, the user will gain ice and fire immunity and complete resistance to all toxins." At that, every observer's eyes gleamed, everyone except Bibi Dong. Immunity to ice and fire, absolute invulnerability to poison, such extraordinary abilities, who wouldn't crave them? Bibi Dong turned to Shi Feng and asked, "Shi Feng, do you want to absorb these two spirit herbs yourself?" Shi Feng shook his head and smiled. "No, I'd like senior sister Nana to take them." At his words, a ripple of surprise passed through the hall. These were exceptionally rare herbs. Why would anyone refuse them? Bibi Dong studied Shi Feng for a long moment, then finally nodded. "Very well. We'll let Nana absorb them." She gestured to her senior sister, Nana, who stepped forward with composed grace. Nana's two spider-type martial spirits were laced with potent venom, just like Shi Feng's own spirit. Both of them already boasted extraordinary immunity to toxins, so further strengthening that resistance would bring little real benefit. It might even dull their spirit's natural potency. By contrast, Juliana's spirit was an enchantment type, more delicate and less suited to outright combat. Bestowing these venomous traits upon her would markedly boost her defenses and give her precious seconds to turn the tide when danger struck. Murmurs of dissent rose among the onlookers. After all, they had expected Shi Feng to claim the herbs for himself. But everyone here knew that only Shi Feng had discovered this hidden grotto and fully understood these herbs' true properties. Even the honored spirit pope had no objection to Shi Feng's suggestion. With no one left to argue, the assembly fell into respectful silence as Nana prepared to absorb the twin spirit herbs. Hulina's eyes filled with tears as she gazed at Shi Feng. He could have consumed those two priceless herbs himself, yet he'd chosen to explain their properties and let her absorb their power instead. She felt an overwhelming debt to him, one she scarcely knew how to repay. "Please," Shi Feng said quietly, "just call me Shi Feng, and don't thank me yet. Integrating these herbs will push your body to its limits." He turned to Bibi Dong. "Master, I need your help. The white star anise black ice grass must be harvested with a metal blade." With that, he drew a dagger from his belt and handed it to her. At the same time, the raging fire apricot tree needs to be unearthed with jade. A moment later, a slender jade knife, one he'd prepared long ago, appeared in Shi Feng's hand. "Let's work together and meet back here as soon as we've got both herbs." Bibi Dong inclined her head and moved off toward the frost-clad grass. Shi Feng, expression serious, strode toward the scalding yang spring where the apricot tree's fiery roots burrowed. With blade in hand and determination in his eyes, he prepared for the arduous task ahead. Shi Feng felt the heat before he saw the plant. The fiery apricot herb clung to the edge of the spring, where the air shimmered with intense fire poison. Ordinary people couldn't approach without risking instant burns, or worse. Sweat beaded on his brow as he edged closer. Each breath brought that scorching toxin deeper into his lungs. He caught Bibi Dong's eye across the steaming pool and gave a subtle nod. In perfect unison, they sprang into action. Shi Feng drew his jade knife in a single fluid motion and began to dig. The blade pierced the earth and roots with ease, each stroke precise. Within moments, he'd unearthed the blazing red, cabbage-shaped herb. With a swift scoop of his hand, he gripped the plant's base and leapt back toward Huliena's position, every muscle straining as he fought the poison heat pressing in around him. Cradling the precious herb close to his chest, Shi Feng raced across the scorched ground. The spring's lethal aura faded behind him with each step, but he kept moving, knowing that one misstep, one hesitation, could mean disaster. By the time he reached Juliana, his shirt was soaked through, and his skin tingled from the fiery residue. Yet in his hand, the apricot herb glowed a triumphant red, proof that he had succeeded where so many others would have failed. Shi Feng's hand felt as if it had pressed against red-hot iron. Agony pulsed through his palm with every heartbeat. When he and Bibi Dong finally reached Juliana, the pair of rare herbs in their hands ceased radiating extreme chill and blistering heat, settling back to a normal temperature. "Senior sister, take them now," Shi Feng urged. Without a moment's hesitation, Juliana plucked both herbs from their wrappings and swallowed them whole. Shi Feng quickly withdrew his injured hand, its flesh torn and raw, and caught the pained look in Juliana's eyes. At the same time, Bibi Dong's fingertips, which had been coated in a thick layer of frost from handling the cold herb, warmed and melted the ice as soon as she released her soul power. They hadn't been gone long, and the fire poison coursing through Juliana hadn't had time to spread deeply. At first, a fierce burning had flared through her veins, but now that sensation was already fading. Shi Feng knew the poison was being drawn out and absorbed by the alchemical properties of the rare herbs. His own battered palms were knitting back together just as quickly. Before long, they would look as good as new. Inside her mouth, the two gel-like herbs dissolved instantly. Juliana's brow, which had been so tightly furrowed moments ago, finally relaxed. The relentless heat of the fire poison had been snuffed out, leaving only calm relief in its place. A heady fragrance bloomed in the air, filling Juliana's senses until it felt as though her very soul was being lifted beyond her body. She clutched at the hem of her robes and forced out a breath. "Shi Feng, what must I do next?" Shi Feng's stern gaze never wavered. "The medicine's effects will hit any moment now. As soon as you feel it stirring, channel your spirit into the yin-yang nexus of your ice-fire yang eye. The spring water hidden there will amplify your body's ability to absorb both the ice and fire essences of the herbs." No sooner had he spoken than Lena's limbs began to tremble uncontrollably. A ghostly blue light surged from her feet, encasing her in an aura of glacial cold that crackled through the air. Before she could recover, a blistering red flame burst up around her ankles, turning the very atmosphere heavy with heat. Blue and red swirled over her form in rapid alternation, each wave of extreme energy wrenching a sharp gasp from her lips. Her mind threatened to fracture under the onslaught of scorching frost and freezing flame. "Senior sister," Shi Feng called, pressing the jade vial of spring water into her hand. "Drink it now. The water will stabilize the twin energies and help you fully absorb the herbs." With shaking fingers, Juliana raised the vial. The icy chill of the liquid seemed to hush the raging extremes inside her. She tipped it to her lips and swallowed. Instantly, a soothing current spread through her veins, taming the tempest of ice and fire until her breathing slowed and her vision cleared. Though beads of sweat still dotted her brow, a triumphant light shone in her eyes. Somehow, she had endured, and she had won. Shi Feng saw that Juliana was about to lose control completely. Without a second thought, he scooped her into his arms and sprinted toward the Binghuo Liangyi spring. When he reached the spot where the hot and cold currents met, he gently set her down at the water's edge and knelt beside her. "Senior sister," he whispered, "trust me. Once the pain subsides, you'll be all right." Juliana managed a weak nod, pain and hope mingling in her eyes. The moment she let herself sink into the mingling waters, the spring's fierce energies crashed over her. She grimaced, then slipped into unconsciousness, her body slowly sinking beneath the surface. Shi Feng's heart pounded. Although the spring's power could stabilize her, he refused to relax his guard. He glanced at Bibi Dong, whose face was etched with worry, and spoke urgently. "Teacher, those 2 fairy herbs she ingested are releasing an enormous amount of energy. If it isn't absorbed quickly, her internal organs could rupture. Only the Binghuo Liangyi spring can suppress and draw out that power. Help her absorb it safely." He pressed his hand against the rushing currents, channeling his own spiritual energy into the spring. As the storm of fire and ice swirled around Juliana's limp form, Shi Feng prayed that its dual temperaments would calm the raging power within her before it was too late. Chapter 119. Poison Body Refinement. The dual herbal energies in her body can also suppress the power of her twin springs, Shi Feng explained. "So we just have to wait until she awakens," Bibi Dong said, her voice calm but resolute. "I trust your judgment." Shi Feng turned to the elderly alchemists gathered around. "Begin harvesting the mature herbs. Be careful to leave the roots intact. This environment will let them regrow quickly." One of the old alchemists grinned. "Don't worry, we've handled rarer herbs than these." Moments later, the alchemists were methodically picking every ripe plant. Shi Feng watched them for a moment, then spoke again. "Master, Dugubo is a titled Douluo. If we're not cautious, we could damage this place and lose its benefits." Bibi Dong's eyes glowed with an icy fire. "Feng, stay here and keep watch over your senior sister. The rest of us will move to the mountain's peak, lay an ambush in the forest ahead, and capture Dugubo alive." Shi Feng bowed his head. "Understood, Master. I'll protect her with my life." With that, Bibi Dong led the alchemists up the slope. They melted into the trees, ready to spring their trap, while Shi Feng remained behind, vigilant as ever. Neither the chrysanthemum Douluo nor the ghost Douluo posed a challenge to Dugubo on their own, and with 2 more titled Douluo and the formidable Bibi Dong on hand, capturing him alive should have been a fait accompli. Yet, here in this vast valley, only 2 people remained. Juliana lay senseless in the steaming spring pool, and no one knew when she might stir. Shi Feng strode along the rim of the ice and fire Yinyi spring, moving from the blistering hot side to the bone-chilling cold edge. He studied the swirling fire poison and glacial toxin coursing through the water with keen interest. Thanks to the corpse poison coursing through his veins, even these terrifying elemental toxins didn't harm him. Instead, they were absorbed and fused into his own deadly brew. Shi Feng allowed the spring's dual poisons to seep into his flesh, imagining how his corpse poison would transform. Once it assimilated both the infernal heat and the Arctic chill, he suspected its power would grow exponentially, and perhaps even gain the destructive traits of fire and ice. Far from killing him, the fierce toxins here served only to temper his body, forging him into something far stronger than before. Shi Feng stood before the twin immortal herbs, heart pounding with equal parts fear and fascination. On one side was the star anise mystic ice grass, its frosted leaves shimmering like shards of glass and radiating a deathly cold. On the other, the fiery Xiaoxue glowed with molten embers, each scarlet petal flickering like living flame. According to legend, each plant harbored a potent toxin, one of searing heat, the other of bone-freezing chill. Yet when combined, these poisons annihilate one another, transforming into raw ice and fire energies that a host can absorb. In theory, that host would gain immunity to both extremes. Shi Feng's mind raced. If he deliberately ingested both toxins, forcing them to neutralize each other inside his body, could he temper himself into a being impervious to frost and flame? No master in history had dared attempt such a thing. Even Dugu Bo's ancient poisons kept a safe distance. But Shi Feng's unique physique, something neither wholly mortal nor entirely immortal, gave him the courage to gamble with life and death. He took a deep breath, then reached for the mystic ice grass. The moment his fingers brushed its stem, an icy wave shattered his veins, as if a glacier had formed in his chest. White-hot agony seized every nerve. Pain like razor shards tore through him, threatening to freeze his blood. Gritting his teeth, Shi Feng forced himself to endure until the pain blazed into numbness. He staggered away and lunged at the fiery Xiaoxue. Its petals were scorching, like dipped in liquid fire. The instant he gripped the stem, ferocious heat tore through his flesh, each muscle fiber convulsing under the inferno. He howled, staggering back into the icy clutch of the mystic ice grass. Ice, flame, ice, flame. He alternated between them in a brutal rhythm. Each switch tore him apart, only to stitch him back together in a furious dance of toxins. Minutes felt like hours, but with every cycle he sensed the two poisons colliding inside him, clashing, and finally calming into a steady burn and frost. Shi Feng swallowed the mounting dizziness, every sinew throbbing with raw power. If he survived, he would emerge forever altered, immune to the coldest winter's breath and the hottest fire's roar. And so, teeth clenched against the agony, he pressed on, determined to prove that the impossible might just be within his grasp. Shi Feng felt a surge of exhilaration as the opposing forces of cold and heat coexisted within him. With every passing moment, his resistance to both fire and ice poisons grew stronger. He couldn't suppress a smile. Perhaps he really could forge a body immune to frost and flame. Of course, it was the ice-fire twin yin technique that kept the remaining toxins in check, preventing them from erupting and tearing through his system. Were it not for its steadying influence, his body might already have broken down every trace of poison. The thought made him want to unhesitatingly plunge into a bath, letting the waters wash away the last vestiges of toxin. But for now, he'd savor this rare moment of triumph and conserve his energy for the challenges still to come. Over the next several hours, Shi Feng alternated between the blistering hot side of the spring and its freezing cold counterpart, pushing his body to its limits. Each time the searing pain or bone-chilling cold threatened to overwhelm him, he'd force himself to his feet and switch sides, time after time. Thanks to the ice-fire yin-yang eye, his resistance to both fire poison and cold poison steadily improved, and with every passing trial, his body grew stronger. About 4 hours into the ordeal, Shi Feng finally settled into a deep meditative posture at the very center of the spring. He opened his eyes and fixed his gaze on the water's surface, just as a soft ripple fanned outward. Moments later, a lithe figure rose from the depths, water streaming from her like liquid silk. Her wet clothes clung to every curve, outlining a flawless silhouette that left Shi Feng momentarily speechless. Stray strands of her short, purple hair plastered themselves to her cheeks, completing an image of otherworldly beauty stepping from the bath. Before he could recover from the stunning sight, a fierce heat flared in his sinuses, the telltale jolt of fire poison rebelling, and blood welled up, trickling uncontrollably from his nose. Even as the pain scorched him anew, Shi Feng refused to look away. Shi Feng's stunned expression set Hu Liena off laughing, her radiant charm so intense that alarm bells rang in his mind. Unfazed by the flicker of frost and flame in his eyes, she simply swam straight toward him. Embarrassed, Shi Feng quickly averted his gaze. "Shi Feng, give me a hand," she called, her voice light and insistent. Before he knew it, she'd reached the water's edge. Shi Feng had no choice but to stretch out his arm. His fingers closed around something astonishingly soft as he hauled her onto the shore. Perhaps he pulled a bit too hard, because in the next instant, Hu Liena coiled herself free, sprang forward, and in one smooth motion pressed him flat against the wet sand. Shi Feng swore he hadn't used any great strength. If anything, she'd vaulted up all by herself. It was the first time she'd ever managed to pin him so effortlessly. Rather than panic, determination surged through him. With a quick push, he flipped her off and scrambled to his feet. Spinning away, he refused to let her see the flush rising in his cheeks. Hulina didn't hesitate. She rose and looked at Shi Feng with a curious tilt of her head. "Teacher, what are they up to?" "They've gone out to ambush Douluo," Shi Feng answered quietly. She folded her arms and studied him. "Why so nervous? You won't even peek over your shoulder." Her tone was light, but inside, her pulse had already picked up. She'd felt the subtle change in Shi Feng's body, a newfound firmness that sent a thrill through her. "All right," she said, stepping back. "I'm going to change. No peeking." With her back to him, she began to undress. Though her voice sounded calm, her heart hammered so loudly she thought he must hear it. Her cheeks burned as she stole glances at his silhouette, silently daring him to look. Instead, Shi Feng straightened, every muscle tense. He heard the faint rustle of fabric, harbored every temptation to turn, and then clenched his jaw, determined not to betray her trust. Huliena's hopeful eyes fell to disappointment. She had longed for even a single glance, but Shi Feng, his heart forever occupied by thoughts of Shuer, kept her at arm's length, as he always had. Juliana hesitated. Memories of Shi Feng's bruised palm, how he'd taken the antidote for her, and the promise he'd made came flooding back. Suddenly, the stubborn knot in her heart began to loosen. If it helped her junior brother, accepting Shuer might not be so unbearable after all. "All right," she whispered. With that, she wrung out her ruined tunic and slipped it into her soul guide. Shi Feng watched her with concern. "Senior sister," he asked, "are you sure you're not uncomfortable standing here? This area is laced with potent fire poison, powerful enough that even Douluo wouldn't linger. Yet you're perfectly fine." Hulina's eyes widened in surprise. Before Shi Feng could react, she dashed forward and struck him sharply across the cheek. He stumbled back, rubbing his jaw. "Senior sister, let's not get caught by master," he urged in a low voice. Hulina let out a soft laugh, her fingers still tingling from the slap. She tilted her head, a mischievous smile crossing her lips. "So it's only safe when he can't see us?" she teased. Chapter 120. Captured Douluo alive, Shi Feng turned his face away, his voice low. "Senior sister, you know what I mean." Just then, the ground trembled beneath them. A ripple of energy surged up from below, only to fade almost instantly, leaving the chamber unnervingly still. "That must be Master confronting Douluo," Shi Feng guessed. "Then let's go up," Hulina said, her eyes alight with resolve. Without hesitation, Shi Feng deactivated his lightning wings and reached out to steady her. "Ow! My arm still aches from the last time you yanked me down," Hulina complained, brushing his hand aside and looping her arms around his waist. A flash of annoyance shot through Shi Feng. He gritted his teeth. "What are you waiting for? Fly!" Buried against his chest, Hulina murmured, "Quickly." Taking a deep breath, Shi Feng refocused and flapped his wings. They lifted off in a powerful surge, cutting through the air. He forced his mind onto the task above, rescuing Douluo. Yet the warmth and softness of Hulina pressed so close to him made that focus slip, triggering reactions he struggled to suppress as they streaked toward the surface. Shi Feng's altered physique was unmistakable to Hulina. Unlike before, he could no longer fend her off with a mere thought. His defenses had shattered. As they hurtled through the sky, their bodies pressed tightly together, and Hulina felt every subtle shift in his form. Inside him, the fiery poison he'd absorbed moments ago still raged, clouding his mind and surging through his veins. It spiked his anger, robbed him of restraint, and with Hulina's warmth and her irresistible presence so close, he lost all control. A rosy flush spread across Hulina's cheeks, her vision swimming. Her legs, once firmly clasped around his waist, began to weaken. The arms that had held him slipped. "Careful!" Shi Feng snapped, shooting his arms around her. He hauled her back against his chest just in time. If he hadn't caught her, she would have tumbled from the sky. The valley below was barely over 300 meters deep, yet with Shi Feng's incredible speed in flight, they were at the mountaintop in the space of a few breaths. Gently, he set Hulina back on solid ground. "Do you realize how dangerous that was?" he asked, his voice sharp with concern. Flying that fast, if you'd slipped, I wouldn't have had time to turn back and catch you. Juliana's gaze dropped. Even her delicate earlobes flushed pink. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. I suddenly felt weak. She stole a glance at the spot where Shi Feng's form had briefly shifted, where his power had flared, and noted with relief that he'd returned to normal. Known for her calm elegance, she rarely showed vulnerability, especially in front of Shi Feng. Yet now, her cheeks warmed with embarrassment at how close she'd come to falling. Shi Feng's irritation melted away when he saw her meek apology. Come on, he said softly. Let's get down from here. He led the way, Juliana following at a safe distance behind. Within minutes, they descended to the mountain's base, both hearts still racing from the unexpected peril. Shi Feng studied the intricate web of sigils glowing on the ground and nodded. Senior sister, the 2 immortal herbs in your system haven't been fully absorbed yet, but their residual potency should be enough to withstand the toxins embedded in this formation. Juliana offered a calm smile and stepped forward without hesitation. Only by fully integrating those potent herbs could her body become truly poison immune, but even in its incomplete state, she'd already shrugged off Dugu Bobu's fiery venom. Any remaining toxins here would be equally harmless, and if by some miracle a droplet slipped through, Lady Bibi Dong's internal alchemy could purge it instantly. Sure enough, as they passed through the circle of venomous runes, neither of them showed so much as a twinge of pain. 100 meters ahead, they saw a cluster of robed disciples, members of Lady Bibi's faction, surrounding a bound figure. Shi Feng and Juliana exchanged a glance and accelerated their pace. When they finally closed the distance, the captive's features came into sharp relief. He was a tall, gaunt man, his lanky frame as straight and sharp as a spear. His hair and beard, dark green as jade, lay in disheveled clumps around sunken cheeks. Even more unsettling were his eyes, twin emerald flames flickering beneath a cold, impassive expression. Clad in a plain gray robe, he looked every bit the formidable poison master everyone had feared, Dugu Bobu himself. Shi Feng stepped forward, his posture calm but alert. The old man seated before him fixed him with dark green eyes that glinted like a venomous snake's. Shi Feng recognized him instantly as Dugu Bo. He fell into step beside Bibi Dong and asked quietly, Teacher, is there any chance he'll surrender? Bibi Dong shook her head, her expression unreadable. I came here hoping for a peaceful resolution. If he refuses to yield, I'll have no choice but to kill him. Dugu Bo's ghostly glare snapped toward Shi Feng, and a crushing aura burst forth, chilling Shi Feng's bones as if he'd been dropped into an ice cavern. Shi Feng clenched his jaw against the numbing cold, until Bibi Dong drew a sharp breath and unleashed a counterforce that shattered Dugu Bo's oppression in an instant. The elder staggered back, spitting blood. Though his injuries from their surprise attack still throbbed, it was the sealing spell on his spirit power that truly crippled him. His martial soul lay useless. Humph, Dugu Bo spat, voice hoarse with contempt. You think I'll bow to this boy? Have you lost your mind? Douluo tapped the hilt of his weapon, his tone as cold as steel. Master, with respect, I say we end this now. Shi Feng raised his hand, palm open. That won't be necessary. His voice was steady, carrying a firmness that brooked no argument. There's still a way to settle this without more bloodshed. A tense silence fell. Pride warred with survival in Dugu Bo's eyes, while Bibi Dong glanced at Shi Feng, a flicker of hope softening her expression. In that moment, the outcome of their confrontation hinged on whether words could triumph over wrath. Shi Feng and Ghost Douluo oversaw Wuhun Temple's punishments. Anyone who crossed the temple, just like Dugu Bo, rarely survived. If it had been solely up to Shi Feng, Dugu Bo would already be dead. Yet Bibi Dong shook her head. She refused to end his life. Dugu Bo's return to the spirit hall could prove invaluable. Though he wasn't the strongest among the titled Douluo, his mastery of poisons struck fear into even the most seasoned fighters. In any future war, having him on their side would turn the battlefield into a death trap within 1,000 meters. Shi Feng himself had to admit that few rivals matched Dugu Bo in large-scale lethality. More importantly, Dugu Bo had remained loyal to Prince Xuexing, repaying the prince's earlier life-saving favor and discreetly earning the Tiando royal family's trust. If he could be persuaded to aid Wuhan Temple in return, seizing the Heaven Dew Empire would become that much easier. That was why Bibi Dong was so determined to spare him, unless Shi Feng absolutely insisted on his execution. Bibi Dong fixed Shi Feng with a probing look. You said you had a way to make him surrender. What's your method? Everyone, including the smoldering Douluo, leaned forward with interest. Douluo sneered. By all means, you Wuhundian sect have hounded me time and again. I'm curious to see how this brat plans to force me to my knees. He stood like a wounded tiger, still dangerous yet clearly unsteady. Shi Feng showed no fear. He stepped forward a few paces and asked in a calm voice, Tell me, are you afraid of death? Douluo laughed bitterly. Who isn't? But if you're threatening me with death to coerce me into joining the spirit hall, don't waste your breath. I'd rather die than serve you. Shi Feng's eyes remained steady. Then what if I said that even if we let you go today, you wouldn't survive more than a few years? The sneer drained from Douluo's face, his brow furrowing. What do you mean? Shi Feng's tone grew colder. Your poison skills are formidable, no doubt. But it's almost laughable that after all these years mastering the poison arts, you nearly killed yourself with your own toxins. If it weren't for those ice and fire eyes you possess, you'd already be dead. Chapter 121. Douluo submits. Douluo's lip curled in derision. What a joke, he scoffed. I have always been known as the Poison Patriarch, master of every toxin under heaven. How could anyone ever poison me? Shi Feng met his challenge with a calm smile. If I'm correct, you suffer numbness in your ribs whenever there's heavy rain or clouds. It starts mild, then intensifies, always striking around noon and again at midnight, each episode lasting close to an hour. Douluo frowned, unconsciously rubbing his side. And there's more, Shi Feng continued. At 3 a.m, you feel pinprick pains on the crown of your head and the soles of your feet. Your body convulses for at least 30 minutes, agony so acute that an ordinary cultivator would die from it. How do you? Douluo's eyes widened in disbelief. The symptoms Shi Feng had just described were known only to him, and to his beloved granddaughter, whom he had sworn to protect with his very life. He had confided in no one else. How could Shi Feng possibly know? A chill ran down Douluo's spine. This secret was his greatest vulnerability, an Achilles heel that, if exploited, could kill him in an instant. And here stood Shi Feng, exposing it without the slightest hesitation. Douluo glanced around, panic flashing in his eyes. His arrogance crumbled in the face of this revelation. The Poison Patriarch, once so confident and unassailable, now realized he was up against someone who knew his deepest secret. For the first time, Douluo felt truly threatened, and he knew that his only option was to submit. Shi Feng's gaze sharpened, the promise of lethal intent flickering just beneath the surface. He didn't answer Douluo's question. Instead, he said calmly, Your symptoms aren't the result of ordinary poison. It's your own toxin, drawn so deep into your marrow that even the Liangyi eye couldn't purge it completely. Without someone to guide you through a thorough detox, you won't last more than a few years. You'll either succumb to the poison or be driven mad by its agony. Douluo's eyes narrowed. You're saying you can detoxify me? Shi Feng inclined his head. Yes, I can heal you. A harsh laugh broke from Douluo. He swept a contemptuous glance over Shi Feng and sneered, So your price is my obedience to Wuhun Palace? How naive. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I'd sooner die than serve the spirit hall. Do you really think I'd trade my freedom for a cure? He studied Shi Feng with mock curiosity, as if daring him to back down, or to lose his composure entirely. Shi Feng knew full well he might die today, but if this was to be his last stand, he would at least have one last barb for his enemies. Standing in the swirl of dust and tension, he allowed himself a faint, wry smile as his gaze flicked between Douluo and the ever-watchful Bibi Dong. He could almost read her thoughts. Was Shi Feng truly injured by Douluo? Was he playing some deeper game, using his healing gift as leverage? Bibi Dong's suspicion sharpened her features, but Shi Feng remained unnervingly calm. He raised a single hand in a gesture of dismissal and spoke evenly. You're mistaken. If you wish to meet your end, I won't stop you, but ask yourself, are you prepared to watch your precious granddaughter suffer for the rest of her life? Douluo's face twisted into a furious snarl. Touch her, and I swear I'll tear you limb from limb. With that, he erupted in murderous intent, a ferocious wave of power rushing straight at Shi Feng. "Humph," Bibi Dong murmured, her voice ice-cold. In an instant, a second aura flared from her, a force hundreds of times more terrifying than Douluo's, and it collided with his attack, crushing it back like a collapsing wall. Douluo reeled, his murderous energy dissipating under Bibi Dong's overwhelming presence. Shi Feng stood his ground, the corner of his mouth lifting in a confident, knowing grin. Despite the danger, he had made his point. No threat, no matter how desperate, would shake him from protecting the innocent. Douluo teetered on unsteady legs, his jade-green eyes locked onto Shi Feng as if he could will him to collapse beneath a torrent of hatred. Every fiber of his being screamed to rip Shi Feng apart, yet he found himself unable to act. Shi Feng let out a slow sigh, his expression matter-of-fact. "Douluo, you're too old to be so reckless. Take a breath and listen." He folded his arms, meeting Douluo's glare with calm resolve. "Do you really think you're the only one cursed by this poison? Your precious granddaughter carries the same taint in her martial soul, and she's been battling it since the day she was born. Mark my words, she'll be far more violent when she finally unleashes her power. She's a beautiful girl, like a delicate flower. How long do you suppose she can endure that searing agony?" The words hit him like a physical blow. Douluo staggered back, pain flickering across his face. He knew all too well what Shi Feng was talking about. From the moment Douluo entered the world, her condition was alarmingly clear. Where healthy infants were born with midnight black hair and eyes to match, she'd emerged with deep purple locks and emerald green irises, an eerie echo of the changes the poison had wrought on him. Now, as Shi Feng's accusation hung in the air, Douluo's composure cracked, revealing the anguish he had long suppressed. Douluo's eyes widened with hope as he fixed his gaze on Shi Feng. "You really can detoxify my granddaughter and me?" Shi Feng smiled calmly. "One look at you was enough to diagnose your condition. Detoxifying both of you isn't beyond my ability. It's simply a matter of effort and time. You already know my price. It depends on whether you're willing to make the necessary sacrifices for your granddaughter." Douluo hesitated. After more than 60 years spent cultivating his Wuhun Jade Phosphorus Snake Emperor, a venom renowned as one of the deadliest in existence, it seemed impossible that a mere teenager could reverse its effects with ease. "Why should I believe you?" he asked. "You claim detox is just a matter of effort. How could you possibly dissolve poison I've nurtured for decades?" Shi Feng's expression remained untroubled. "Allow me to prove myself," he said. "Let me start by detoxifying your granddaughter. Once she's safe, you'll know my words aren't empty." At this, emotion stirred in Douluo's heart. He had lived in solitude for as long as he could remember, his granddaughter the only family he had left. For her, he would dare to believe. Even a titled Douluo subjected to that level of poisonous torment would find it worse than death, let alone someone so young as his granddaughter. Douluo's jaw went slack. He forced out a reluctant reply. "All right, if you can actually cleanse my granddaughter of the poison, then I'll consider working for you." Shi Feng shook his head, voice cool and firm. "I don't want your consideration. I want your unequivocal yes." Douluo's hesitation was immediate. He had spent his life valuing freedom above all else. At first, he'd turned down the Spirit Hall's offer rather than submit to its authority. Now, faced with Shi Feng's unwavering gaze, he wavered. Shi Feng said nothing more, simply held the old man's eyes with steady resolve. The imbalance of power between them was colossal, so vast that even if Shi Feng bound Douluo with necrokinetic control, he might never fully dominate a titled Douluo's will. If binding Douluo had been possible, there would have been no need for this parley, and very soon the entire Douluo continent would have bowed before Shi Feng alone. That was why Shi Feng had orchestrated this confrontation using Douluo's plight as leverage. Douluo, above all, was a man who honored his word. Once he made a promise, he never broke it. And now, cornered by his granddaughter's life and Shi Feng's implacable resolve, Douluo knew he had no choice but to yield. Douluo's shoulders sagged with relief, and he nodded gravely. "If you truly can rid Yanyan of this poison, I pledge my service to you." He spoke as much for his granddaughter's sake as his own. At 17, Douluo still had her whole life ahead of her, Douluo had endured losing someone precious once before and refused to let history repeat itself. Shi Feng finally allowed himself a small, hopeful smile. "Where is your granddaughter now?" "Tiando Royal Academy," Douluo replied. Shi Feng glanced over at Bibi Dong, whose expression was already one of understanding. She turned to Ghost Douluo and offered a polite bow. "Elder Douluo, I'm sorry to trouble you." Ghost Douluo waved a dismissive hand. "You're not troubling me at all, and the academy isn't far from here." He then turned to Shi Feng. "Young hero, please, follow me." With that, the unlikely group set off toward Tiando Royal Academy, each step bringing them closer to the fate awaiting young Douluo, and to the promise Shi Feng was determined to keep. Shi Feng watched as Ghost Douluo let out a low chuckle. "Catching people is my specialty." With that, the half-ghost spirit drew into a slinking black shadow and slipped out of sight. Having keyed his senses to the unique aura of the jade phosphorus snake, he needed no more than moments to locate and subdue the frightened little girl. Bibi Dong drew Shi Feng aside, concern etched in her eyes. "Shi Feng, are you absolutely sure you can purge the poison from Douluo's body?" Shi Feng gave her a confident grin. "I'm no master alchemist like Tang San. I can't concoct a perfect antidote, but I can keep Douluo alive, and in doing so, I'll unlock new depths of power for myself." His method was neither elegant nor refined, crude perhaps, but he'd seen it work. Bibi Dong studied the tall, handsome young man before her, scarcely believing this was the same helpless child she'd rescued so long ago. Gathering her courage, she laid a hand on his shoulder. "I believe in you." Less than half an hour later, Ghost Douluo returned, cradling an unconscious girl in his arms. Douluo rushed forward, panic-stricken. "Stay calm," Ghost Douluo said, a reassuring smile on his lips. With a gentle gesture, he channeled a stream of soul energy into Douluo's still form. Her breathing steadied, color returned to her cheeks, and her eyes fluttered open. Shi Feng exhaled, relief washing over him. The first step was done, and now, a new chapter of their journey awaited. Chapter 122, Douluo's Panic. Hey, Douluo snorted softly as she cracked open her eyes, suspicion flitting across her gaze. In front of her stood a circle of strangers, and at their center, her grandfather, Douluo. "Grandpa!" she cried, scrambling into his arms. She glanced at the onlookers with wide, fearful eyes. Each of them radiated a formidable aura, and her grandfather's face was streaked with blood at the corner of his mouth. Douluo gently patted her back. "Yan, calm down. I asked these people to bring you here so we could cleanse the poison from your body." "I'm not poisoned, Grandpa," Douluo protested, brow furrowed. "What cure are you talking about?" Her grandfather sighed, pain and regret in his voice. "Yan, I caused this myself. My jade phosphorus snake spirit Wuhun, the venom I wield, is so deadly even I cannot escape its effects. For years, every time I unleash it, the agony nearly kills me. A human simply shouldn't withstand such poison. And you've carried a trace of it since birth. If it erupts unchecked, the pain will be far worse for you than it ever was for me." "Really?" Douluo's face drained of color. If her grandfather, the great Douluo, couldn't bear this torment, how could she possibly survive it? "It's true. That's why I had them bring you here." Douluo waved toward Shi Feng. "He can detoxify you." Douluo stared at Shi Feng in surprise. He looked barely older than she was, tall, broad-shouldered, and ruggedly handsome, though his short, dark purple hair and emerald-green eyes lent him an almost otherworldly air. The face wasn't classically beautiful, but it held a rare, magnetic charm. "Grandpa," Douluo began hesitantly, "can he really do it? Even you couldn't find a cure." Shi Feng met her gaze and offered a calm smile. "You'll know soon enough." Douluo cleared his throat and examined Shi Feng closely. "Boy, what's your method for removing green phosphorus snake venom?" Shi Feng's lips curved into an enigmatic smile. "My detoxification technique is quite special. It must be done privately. No one else can watch." Douluo's brow furrowed. Poison was a cruel business. Secrecy only heightened her doubts. Yet in Shi Feng's steady eyes, she glimpsed an unwavering confidence that stirred a flicker of hope in her heart. As the two elders murmured among themselves, Shi Feng prepared to demonstrate the unorthodox cure that, if successful, would save Douluo's life. Douluo's expression darkened. "Boy, what trick are you playing at?" Shi Feng shrugged, a cool smile on his lips. "Do you think I'd waste my time toying with you? If you still doubt me, I can kill you both right here. Silence fell over the clearing. Douluo offered no denial. After all, if Shi Feng lacked the means to detoxify, why would the high priest and the 4 elders of Wuhun Hall have intervened? Shi Feng turned to Douluo. Come with me. Without waiting for an answer, he strode toward the forest's shadowy heart. Douluo hesitated, glancing at her grandfather for permission. Douluo placed a firm hand on her shoulder. Go on, I'll wait here. She exhaled in relief. All right. With that, Douluo raced after Shi Feng, disappearing into the undergrowth. Douluo watched her go, entirely untroubled. His granddaughter was no delicate child. She had already attained level 31 and mastered a control-type battle soul, the jade phosphorus snake. Few in their circle could withstand its venom. Nearby, Huliena's brow creased with concern, but Bibi Dong gently held her back, ensuring she stayed behind. Teacher, I'm worried about Shi Feng, Huliena admitted, her voice trembling slightly. Bibi Dong looked up from her meditation and raised an eyebrow. Isn't it his ability you're concerned about? Huliena bit her lip, cheeks flushing. She fell silent, unable to finish. Inwardly, she was jealous. What could happen to Shi Feng when he was alone with another woman? True, this girl wasn't as classically beautiful as Huliena, but her figure was flawless, and there was a strange, magnetic quality about her that could captivate any man. The forest here was so dense that after a short distance, Shi Feng vanished from view behind a wall of trunks and undergrowth. He paused, waiting. Soft footsteps soon rustled through the leaves. He turned toward the sound and saw the woman approaching, Douluo, 7 years his senior. She moved with a supple grace, as though every joint and muscle had been melted into liquid harmony. Douluo hesitated, just a breath away. Ever since her grandfather had described the poison coursing through her veins, a venom so deadly that even a Teedle Douluo of his caliber was powerless, she had doubted whether someone as young as Shi Feng could truly cleanse it from her body. Could this boy, barely her junior, really carry out the detoxification she so desperately needed? Her grandfather was injured by these very people, and ever since, she harbored a deep-seated hostility towards Shi Feng. When he finally turned to face her, her green eyes flashed with fury. Boy, she warned, her voice low and fierce, don't think about pulling any tricks, or you won't like the consequences. Shi Feng didn't bother with small talk. He strode straight toward the strange girl. What do you intend to do? Douluo narrowed her eyes, took a step back, and pressed herself against an old, gnarled tree. Shi Feng gave a dazzling smile, revealing 2 rows of perfect white teeth. Relax, I'm not interested in you. I just need to detoxify you. She couldn't deny that this man was handsome, far more so than her own boyfriend, but when she heard his words, her lip curled in contempt. Men are all the same, she sneered. Without another word, Shi Feng reached out and swept Douluo off her feet, pinning her against the rough bark. Their bodies pressed together, and she caught a brief sharp scent of sandalwood and mint. See? It was all a lie, Douluo hissed. She flexed her fingers into poisoned claws and lashed out at him. One graze from those toxin-tipped nails would kill him within moments. Anger, more than caution, drove her movements. In that instant, she no longer cared what would happen to Shi Feng. Her claws raked across Shi Feng's chest, the razor-sharp emerald-green nails tearing at his shirt and scoring his skin with a screech like metal on glass. The sound was so piercing, it made his scalp tingle. This, Douluo's voice caught in her throat as she stared in disbelief at his unyielding body. Unfazed, Shi Feng grabbed her shoulders with both hands and pressed her firmly against the wall. Under her horrified gaze, his eyes darkened to pitch black, and 2 elongated fangs slid into view. What are you planning? She screamed, panic rising in her throat. The strange, fearsome youth before her seemed ready to sink those teeth into her. Summoning every ounce of will, Douluo released her martial soul. In an instant, her limbs went limp, her torso swayed unnaturally, and a fierce glint ignited in her emerald eyes. Between her brows, a single diamond-shaped green scale shimmered. Shi Feng paused mid-motion and followed her gaze downward, and froze. Douluo's legs had vanished, fused into a single, powerful serpent's tail that thrashed across the floor. With a sudden lunge, the tail coiled around him, its crushing strength leaving him no room to react. Chapter 123. The Third Servant. 3 soul rings materialized around Duguyan, 2 dull yellow bands and 1 deep purple. Shi Feng blinked at the sudden manifestation of power, but his surprise lasted only an instant. Without warning, he lunged forward and bit down hard on the girl's pale, slender throat. Despite Duguyan's obvious physical advantage, she couldn't wrench herself free. Shi Feng's grip was unbreakable. He held fast, his teeth sinking in. A sharp scream burst from Duguyan's lips and carried across the courtyard, echoing for over 100 meters. At that cry, Dugubo's face drained of color. He lunged toward Shi Feng, intent on rescue, but Douluo intercepted him with a roar. "Back off, brat. If you so much as lay a hand on her, you'll answer to me. Now." His furious command froze Douluo in his tracks. Watching from nearby, Hulina paled. She had detected no tremor in the surrounding martial aura, yet Duguyan's pained wail left no doubt. Shi Feng was actually hurting her. Each stuttering gasp tugged at Hulina's heart with growing alarm. Could he truly have gone that far? At the edge of the gathering, Bibi Dong's eyes narrowed with suspicion. She recalled her warning to Shi Feng. Should he ever treat a girl like an animal, she vowed to end him with her own hands. Now, her gaze flicked sharply between Shi Feng and the wounded Duguyan, wondering what terrible truth lay behind this brutal act. Hulina's features tightened with worry. She made to dash forward, but Bibi Dong caught her arm. "Not yet," she whispered. Still, Hulina forced herself to trust Shi Feng. He wouldn't do something so reckless with so many witnesses around. Duguyan, meanwhile, thrashed and unleashed wave after wave of soul energy, yet the lethal biphosphorus poison in her veins had no effect on him. Shock turned to terror as she watched her own blood pour into the boy's waiting mouth. He calmly tilted his head back and swallowed. When Shi Feng felt he'd taken enough, he finally withdrew his fangs and straightened. He wiped his lips, betraying no remorse. His original plan had been simple: inflict a bite, introduce enough toxin to enslave Duguyan as a mindless zombie, then back off. But once her blood was within reach, he'd found himself unable to stop drinking. Duguyan slumped to the ground, chest heaving. A dizzy wave of poison-like heat scrambled her senses. Had she somehow been poisoned in turn? Astonishment and fear warred in her eyes as she stared up at Shi Feng, whose unreadable expression gave nothing away. Duguyan stared at Shi Feng in stunned silence. No trace of the gash that had marred her neck remained. No pain, no swelling, nothing. She ran trembling fingertips over the spot, disbelieving that just moments ago she had been cut through with her own legendary poison threatening to consume her. Yet here she stood, unscathed and alive. Before her, the young man, several years her junior, remained perfectly calm. His dark eyes studied her with quiet curiosity. How could someone so young withstand her venom and even use it against herself? As the realization dawned, a warm, unexpected gratitude blossomed in her chest. This boy, Shi Feng, had saved her life, and in doing so had staked a claim on her loyalty she'd never before felt for anyone besides her grandfather. Shi Feng said nothing. He simply watched, a faint smile tugging at his lips as he reached out and flicked a single drop of her blood from his fingertip. He tasted it, an act born of both habit and hunger, and then drew back. "Your blood is exquisite, Duguyan," he remarked softly. "Though compared to Zhao Yuyue's, it's not quite as pure." Heat rose to her cheeks. She bowed her head shyly. "I'm no longer as perfect as I once was," she admitted. He cocked an eyebrow. "Not perfect?" Her response was a bashful nod. "I've already pledged my perfection to another." Shi Feng's curiosity sharpened. "Someone else?" "I belong to Yu Tianheng," she confessed, looking up at him. "He's my boyfriend, a young genius of the Blue Lightning Overlord Longzong, the only one worthy of my heart." For a moment, Shi Feng's expression flickered with interest. Yu Tianheng, a prodigy coveted by countless factions, would make a valuable ally or asset. The thought passed through his mind that perhaps, in time, he could bend the brilliant cultivator to his own cause. But he remained composed, his patient smile never wavering. "I understand," he said at last. "We each have our own paths to follow." He stepped back, allowing her the space to recover fully. Whatever lay ahead, new alliances, rivalries, or deeper conspiracies, Shi Feng knew that today he had earned a powerful friend in Duguyan. And that was only the beginning. As Shi Feng continued his meditation, Duguyan's appearance abruptly shifted. Her dark purple hair lightened, and the green sheen in her eyes faded back to their natural hue. The jade phosphorescent snake venom she'd absorbed had been neutralized. Shi Feng's own corpse poison had fused with it, stripping it of all harmful properties. With a cultivation level well above Dugu Yan's and toxins far more formidable than hers, Shi Feng had effortlessly turned her greatest weapon against itself in mere moments. Shi Feng surveyed the motionless corpses at his feet and shook his head. Were zombies still afraid of poison? Clearly not. Unless struck down by divine judgment or finished off by a stronger hand, the undead were effectively immortal. Dugu Yan rose from the ground, then knelt before him. "Master," she whispered, her voice edged with reverence. Shi Feng waited until he was certain her will was fully under his control, then reached out and helped her to her feet. "There will be others who come under your sway," he said. "So from now on, don't call me master, understand?" "Yan understands," she replied, eyes bright with obedience. He paused, then added, "And if you ever encounter a man named Tang San, do not kill him. He's under my protection." Yan understands. Dugu Yan hesitated for a moment, then spoke earnestly. "Will you help my grandfather detoxify? He's the only family I have. I can't bear the thought of him suffering that cruel torture any longer." A gentle smile crossed Shi Feng's face. "Of course, he'll one day serve as an elder in our spirit hall. I'll see that he's fully healed." He spent the next few minutes explaining the nature of zombie physiology, how undeath sustained itself, and cautioned her never to turn other living beings into zombies against their will. Yan remembers," she said firmly. Shi Feng nodded in approval. "Good. Let's head back." With that, the two of them set off, the lingering threat of the undead momentarily quelled by Shi Feng's careful guidance. "Remember to call me Shi Feng in front of others. Don't let anyone suspect our true relationship." Dugu Yan inclined her head and fell in step behind him. Together, they retraced their path down the mountain. Shi Feng's heart swelled with satisfaction. Once Dugu Yan belonged to him, how could Dugu Bo possibly escape? He would be only too willing to swear fealty to the Five Souls Hall. By evening, the sky was still pale with dusk. The two walked in single file along the winding trail. Shi Feng's once neat robe was now shredded in places, ragged tears scoring the fabric as if clawed by some wild beast. Bibi Dong, waiting at the foot of the path, eyed him warily. After all, it had taken them half an hour to return, and in that time, eyewitnesses had heard Dugu Yan's terrified screams. Now Shi Feng stood before them, his clothes in tatters. Something wasn't right. Dugu Bo's rage flared so hot his temples throbbed. He clenched his fists as though to rip Shi Feng to pieces. And yet, the moment his eyes settled on Dugu Yan, he froze. Her hair, once an unnatural silver, had reverted to its normal black. Her eyes had lost that strange, otherworldly gleam. She looked simply like a young girl. Shi Feng paid them no mind. With a faint, confident smile, he straightened his ruined robe. "Shall we?" he asked, motioning toward the gates of the Five Souls Hall. "Grandpa!" Dugu Yan darted forward and clung to Dugu Bo's sleeve. He froze, speechless for a moment. "Yan, what's the matter?" "Grandpa, Shi Feng just purified the biphosphorus poison in my veins," she said, drawing a relieved breath. "I feel so much better now, thanks to him." A wave of relief washed over Dugu Bo, so the boy really did have the skill to detoxify that venom. "Then explain why you screamed just now," he said, frowning at Shi Feng. "And why are his clothes torn?" Despite the rescue, Dugu Bo wasn't about to overlook any impropriety. Everyone waited, their eyes on Dugu Yan, as if suspecting the worst. She shook her head vigorously. "Grandpa, you've got it all wrong. When Shi Feng pressed down to treat me, I panicked. I thought he was attacking me. I screamed and accidentally ripped his shirt." Dugu Bo's expression remained doubtful. "If that's so, why did you panic and shout? Is the detox going to hurt?" Dugu Bo asked hesitantly. Dugu Yan bit her lip, searching for the right words. At last she said, "Grandpa, once Shi Feng begins the detox, you'll see, it isn't what you're expecting." Her tone was earnest, and Dugu Bo's brow gradually softened. Standing beside her, Bibi Dong let out a relieved sigh. If Shi Feng really did possess some dreadful secret power, she might have had to step in and punish him. Dugu Bo turned back to Shi Feng, a touch of embarrassment in his eyes. "Young brother, thank you, and I apologize for doubting you and speaking so bluntly." Shi Feng inclined his head courteously. "Elder Dugu, your concern was natural. I understand completely. Now that we've cleared the air, let's begin your detox. Dugubo nodded. Just the two of us then? Exactly. Shi Feng gestured toward the courtyard gate. Please, come with me. He led the way, carefully avoiding the others. He couldn't risk anyone discovering the true nature of his abilities, how he could twist living souls into loyal variants of himself. As Shi Feng and Dugubo disappeared from view, Liena exchanged a worried glance with Bibi Dong. After all, Dugubo was a titled Douluo. There was no telling what might happen if he realized Shi Feng's full power. Bibi Dong gave Shi Feng a reassuring smile. Don't worry, Dugubo's soul power has been sealed. He won't be able to harm you, only startle you a little. Together, Shi Feng and Dugubo slipped away to a quiet glade hidden among ancient pines. Once they'd stopped, Dugubo studied Shi Feng with a mixture of hope and hesitation. Brother Feng, he began, voice rough with pain, how can you help me rid myself of this poison? Dugubo's usual hostility was gone, replaced by gratitude. Shi Feng had saved his granddaughter Yanyan from a fate worse than death, and now Dugubo was eager to repay the debt, even if it cost him everything. Shi Feng met his gaze calmly. Senior Dugu, Shi Feng said, you can call me Feng. Yanyan's poisoning was severe, but nothing compared to what's been infecting you these past centuries. I can't promise to expel every last toxin in a single attempt, but I can relieve your agony, and once we finish, the suffering will fade quickly. Dugubo nodded firmly. I've endured this torment for longer than I care to remember. A bit more waiting won't matter. Please go ahead. With a quiet nod, Shi Feng shifted his stance and allowed the faint outline of his zombie form to shimmer into view, ready to begin the delicate work of purification.